6 o'clock Central African time it is. Welcome to it. This is Channel Africa. My name is Asanda Beda. On this Wednesday, the 3rd of December. Let's go to news. Here's Onele Nsinsi to give us our first update for this morning. And following her is Musibudi Makura with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and a very good morning to our listeners. Police have arrested the prominent Tunisian opposition figure Ayachi Hamami at his home to enforce a 5-year prison term on a conviction for conspiracy against state security. An appeals court handed down jail terms of up to 45 years last week to dozens of opposition leaders, including Hamani, business figures and lawyers on charges of conspiracy to overthrow the president, Kais Saied. Critics have called the sentence a sign of Saied's increasingly authoritarian rule. The opposition, meanwhile, says the charges are fabricated and aim to crush Saied's critics through the judiciary. President Bola Tinubu has nominated Nigeria's former top general to replace the defense minister. Christopher Musa resigned amid a surge in mass kidnappings and Islamist attacks in the north that has led to the president to declare a security emergency. Musa served as Nigeria's chief of defense staff from 2023 until October this year. He will succeed Muhammad Badura Abdubakar, a former regional governor who stepped down as defense minister on Monday, citing health reasons. The diplomatic spat between South Africa and the U.S. continues to intensify. The United States has invited Pretoria to the first G20 Sherpas meeting to be held in the U.S. The meeting is set to take place on the 15th and 16th in Washington. This exclusion of South Africa comes after the Trump administration boycotted the G20 summit held in South Africa 2 weeks ago, citing genocide of the Afrikaner. The U.S. took over the G20 presidency from South Africa yesterday. Sophie Mukwena reports.
In the invitation to the members of the G20, Washington has made it clear that South Africa will not be invited to the Sherpas meeting before end of the year. Pretoria anticipated this hostility, and as much as the country is a founding member of the G20, Pretoria is expected to channel its energies on the next host, that is the United Kingdom. In 2027, President Trump's hostility against South Africa will likely escalate next year. However, the U.S. will hold the midterm elections later next year, just before the G20 Leaders Summit.
The South African Weather Service has issued a yellow level 4 and level 2 warning across the country today. The forecast includes severe thunderstorms and fire danger alerts, which will result in potential risks such as flooding, hail, strong winds and dangerous fire conditions. In the KwaZulu-Natal province, a level 5 warning has been forecast for areas in the northern part of the province, while level 4 has been issued for areas along the coastline, including eThekwini and those in the Middlelands. Senzelwe Mzila is the spokesperson for the KwaZulu-Natal Department of Cooperative Governance and Traditional Affairs.
Residents are urged to exercise utmost caution. Disaster management teams will be closely monitoring these areas.
Lastly, authorities in Sri Lanka say more than 400 people have been killed in flash flooding and landslides caused by cyclone Detwa. The Disaster Management Center says 1.4 million people have been affected and over 200,000 people have been evacuated from their homes. Sri Lankan president called it the most challenging natural disaster in the country's history. Pakistan has accused India of preventing its planes from using Indian airspace to deliver humanitarian relief to Sri Lanka. For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, South Africa's Banyana defeats Morocco by 2-0 in a friendly match in Morocco. And the question is Serena Williams coming back to tennis? I'll tell you more at 6:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine. Every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Day on the continent today. We are together for the next 3 hours here on Rise and Shine. Of course, normally it would be Asanda, Beda and Peter Ndoro. Today I'm riding solo, and we've got lots to cover. Going to Nigeria, one of the stories we'll be touching on today. And the country's defense minister has now resigned. We heard last week the President Tinubu, declaring a nationwide security emergency in the country. As we know, the country of Nigeria has been grappling with insurgents and insecurity, and more specifically the upsurge of kidnappings, especially that of school children. So the defense minister there stepping down, citing health reasons, but generally everybody believing that the reasons are more on the security front and the challenges the country is facing there. Also, our president of South Africa, Cyril Ramaphosa, is in Maputo, Mozambique, and is there for a visit to strengthen economic, political and security cooperation ties with the country of Mozambique. We'll see what that yields in. Of course, that won't be all we cover. As I said, we'll be together for the next 3 hours. At Channel Africa 1 is our handle. That's across our various social media platforms. www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us, and we'd love to hear your views and questions about our show. Also, you can connect via our YouTube. That's where we are live streaming on that very same handle on our social media platforms at Channel Africa 1. My name is Asanda Beda. If you've just joined us, good morning.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
You know, you'd think it's December and news slows down when it's the end of the year, because I guess the rest of us wanted to slow down because of year-end fatigue. But we've got a busy day today in terms of what's happening in developments on our news front. What we start with on Rise and Shine after the 6 a.m. news is a feature that we call the Africa Roundup. This is where we bring you a list of those news happening in and around our continent, compiled by our team of researchers, our reporters and editors, to make sure that you are up to date in terms of what's happening. And today we go to Nigeria first, where the country has granted asylum to Guinea-Bissau's presidential candidate Fernando Diaz da Costa, just days after a coup disrupted the announcement of the country's election results. Nigeria's foreign minister said Diaz da Costa, who stood for the Party for Social Renewal, was placed under special protection at the Nigerian embassy following threats made against him. Blank Ankhla reports.
Nigeria's offer came as the Economic Community of West African States, or ECOWAS, attempted to persuade the officers to stand down. At a meeting with the body on Monday, tempers flared as officials urged the soldiers to allow proclamation of the disputed presidential election results. That was according to a Reuters witness. ECOWAS also demanded the restoration of constitutional order in Guinea-Bissau and warned it could impose sanctions on the nation. Diaz, a 47-year-old relative political newcomer, has said he was on track to win the November 23 presidential election before the military coup. The opposition coalition backing him has also denounced the takeover. They said it is a desperate attempt by President Umaro Sissoco Embalo and his supporters to block the proclamation of election results that would have confirmed his defeat.
African diplomats, legal experts, and humanitarian organizations are meeting in Pretoria this week as part of a global effort to strengthen respect for the laws of war. The International Committee of the Red Cross says international humanitarian law is facing increasing pressure as attacks on civilians, hospitals, and essential services rise worldwide. The ICRC's legal advisor, Romina Morello, has more.
We know that there are approximately 130 armed conflicts, 130 armed conflicts around the world, and many of them have gone through for decades. We see people, civilians, trapped in a cycle of violence, of loss, of despair, and we know that there are rules to prevent this. There are rules that have been created, so the rules of war, the international humanitarian law, as you just mentioned, was created to prevent this from happening. And the whole world has agreed on that. All of the states have agreed that those rules are the minimum standards to protect civilians at war.
To Zambia now, where the president there, Hakainde Hichilema, has expressed support for ongoing discussions on amending the country's constitution. Speaking at State House on Tuesday during a meeting with key stakeholders, he said the aim is not always to secure a victory, but to steer the nation towards consensus.
Let's allow them to complete what we ask them to do. Let's be patient. One of the things I've learned over time myself is patience. So let's allow them to complete their process, they hand over the report, and I want to assure you that the report will go to where it should go. There's only one place it should go. Yes, to the public, to the people of Zambia. But as Honorable Belem says, in our constitutional order, in our way of curtailing excesses of one group of people against another in the same country, we created institutions that should handle certain things. In this case, Parliament Niamene.
Kenya's Ministry of Energy and Petroleum has appointed the Kenya Electricity Generating Company, KenGen, as the owner and operator of the country's first nuclear power plant. The project will be developed in partnership with the Nuclear Power and Energy Agency, or NUPEA. Cabinet Secretary Opio Wandai says the initial phase will see the construction of a roughly 2-gigawatt facility with plans to expand capacity to up to 6 gigawatts in the future. NUPEA Managing Director Peter Njenga provides further detail.
I just want to assure Kenyans that we are equal to the task. We have developed very many power plants. So using the same expertise that we have used before to build the geothermal, to build the hydro, to build the wind, we are going to ensure that the nuclear power plant, the first one in Kenya, is done within the timelines that are expected to help Kenya to safeguard ourselves to the power that is required to take us to the next level.
And finally, a teenager suing the Australian government to overturn a ban on social media for under-16s says the measure would make the internet more dangerous for young people and be widely circumvented. Rem Nabong has more.
Noah Jones sits in a Sydney bedroom scrolling Instagram. In just over a week, this could be a thing of the past for the 15-year-old student, as Australia's under-16 social media ban comes into effect on December 10. But Jones has other plans. He is a co-plaintiff in a High Court case against Communications Minister Annika Wells and E-Safety Commissioner Julie Inman Grant.
I believe that as a young Australian, we as a whole will have our constitutional right taken away from us, and we will also be invisible with this ban. We won't be able to share our views or opinions, and we won't be able to hear others' views and opinions, political or just about anything. Instead of cutting kids off from social media because we're not the problem, we should be cutting off the bad things about social media.
The law aims to block minors from platforms such as Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, YouTube, and Snapchat. The government says the ban will protect children from harmful content and online predators.
Also, the family of student activist Caiphas Nyoga, who was brutally murdered in 1987 in South Africa, say they hope justice will prevail and that his murderers will be slammed with a heavy sentence. This after the Johannesburg High Court found 2 of the 3 apartheid police officers guilty of the murder. Nyoga was a student activist and leader who was shot 9 times at his home in Davidton Township while sleeping. The trio, Major Leon van den Berg, Sergeant Abram Engelbrecht and Peter Stander, have been on trial for the 1987 murder. Judge Ishmael Abrahams acquitted Major Leon van den Berg, finding that the state failed to prove its case against him beyond reasonable doubt. Nonzigelelo Mtabela reports.
The state security officers maintained that they killed 23-year-old student activist in self-defense. But the state prosecutor argued that Nyoga was sleeping with 3 of his other friends who were removed from the room so that Nyoga could be assassinated. Nyoga's sister Agriela Nyoga, who was also in the house that fateful night, believes that her brother's death was carefully planned. She says, as a family, they've had to endure the pain for 30 years.
We knew their vision was wrong. And finally, it has been proved that he was not carrying any weapon. He was defenseless and he was murdered in his sleep, which was very painful to us because he was murdered inside his room and we were also present. So that was a very heavy burden to carry for all these years. And it's a pity that my parents didn't live to see this day.
National Prosecuting Authority Regional Spokesperson Lumka Mahanjane says the state will also need to study the judgment for Major Leon van den Berg, who was acquitted.
The state welcomes the judgment of the court where it found accused number 2 and accused number 3 guilty of the murder of Caiphas Nyoga. However, with relation to accused number 1, who has been acquitted for the charges, the state will study the judgment and decide how we move forward with that case.
Truth and Reconciliation Commissioner and human rights lawyer Yasmin Sook says this has been a long wait for the family.
This was a cold-blooded execution of a young man. This was state-sponsored violence, and these men needed to cough up where the instructions came from for them to carry out this dastardly deed. And while justice has been served by the conviction, at the end of the day we have to ask the question, how much more truth have we learned from this experience?
The 2 convicted men will remain in custody until the 11th of December 2025 for a new bail application. For SABC News, I'm Nomtsigalelo Mtabela in Johannesburg.
At 17 minutes past 6 Central African time, we come to the end of today's edition of the Africa Roundup. We'll do this again tomorrow after the 6 a.m. news on Rise and Shine.
Channel Africa is evolving, and so are you. Stay connected wherever you are with our brand new website and mobile app. Stream your favorite shows, catch up on African news, culture, and conversations, all at your fingertips.
Africa is just a tap away.
Your world, your stories, now on the go.
Stay connected wherever you are.
Visit channelafrica.co.za or download the Channel Africa app today. Channel Africa, the African perspective. Wake up to the essence of the continent. Rise and shine on Channel Africa.
All right, on Wednesdays, we delve into the West African region of our continent, looking at some stories making headlines there. And we get analysis with that with our West Africa region political scientist and conflict resolution analyst, Dr. David Matsanga. Dr. Matsanga, how are you on this particular Wednesday?
I am fine, Asanda. I am in Mali. It is 4:20 here. You woke me up, and I'm here to go on the job. Thank you.
You were jet
Good morning,
somewhere,
Africa.
always, even in December. There's no rest for you. So thank you for waking up
No,
for us.
Africa. Look, Africa doesn't rest. Africa makes mistakes all the time. I have been in Mali here for some time to make sure that Africa works on, especially West Africa, especially Nigeria, which you are going to start with. So thank you very much. Africa never rests. I have to rest when time comes, but not now.
Right, and let's start with Nigeria. I know it's a bit of a sour point for you, but we have to start there. The country's defense minister has resigned. We know that there have been security concerns in the country with an upsurge of kidnappings, especially of school children. However, the defense minister is saying his reason for stepping down is health related.
No, the minister was here sometime. 2 weeks ago, I was in Mali again when the minister came here with hot air, blowing a hot air about Nigeria's security arrangements. But one of the reasons, the deeper reasons why the minister resigned is when Mali and other countries confronted him for having covert operations through the French to destabilize the Sahara region. You know, Mali has actually suffered 2 coups, several coups, actually not too many, counter coups, and the people coming to overthrow the government of this country. So the minister came here, but he was told the truth. Why Nigeria is giving France access so that covert operations go ahead against Sahara region. But when the minister came back to brief the president, he was told it is not proper. The minister even suggested that it is better to negotiate with the people of Southeast and other places instead of having to use force. So the resignation was not healthy conditions. Does he look unhealthy himself? No. This is a man who was even busting his chest in the hotel when I looked at him. So he wasn't unhealthy at all. So resignation of such health conditions. Nigeria is a mess, total mess, my sister.
And last week, President of Nigeria, Tinubu, had declared that Nigeria is now on a national security emergency. Do you suspect that we might be getting more clarity in terms of the scope of this emergency that's been declared?
It is too late for him to even come. He was sleeping when Matanga was warning him, when Matanga was telling him that the country has been engulfed by terrorists. When terrorists came and joined the government, his vice president is even more of a terrorist than a sympathizer, than a man guiding the country. So Tinubu went to sleep. His commander of the army went to sleep. They all benefited. They made money out of the suffering of the people of Nigeria. Terrorists came to pick our girls. I am telling you, Asanda, you ladies must cry for these younger daughters who went to school but never came back. Thousands and thousands of them, thousands and thousands of Christians have been murdered. The Americans are giving us hot air, blow hot air and go back because they are making deals. You know, America makes deals. So I don't know what deal they want to make. But come and help these people now. Come and help these people now. Come and help Nigeria. It is broken down. Everything is gone. Everything is gone. European Union. I see some diplomats in European Union working with suits around Abuja in good air-conditioned houses. This country is collapsed. Is a pariah state, breeding terrorists in the entire region of West Africa.
On the other hand, staying with Nigeria, the country has given asylum to Guinea-Bissau's presidential candidate, Fernando Diaz da Costa. And this comes just days after a coup disrupted the announcement of election results in that country of Guinea-Bissau. How dire or serious are these security threats that Fernando Diaz da Costa is said to be facing?
Very serious. But you know the links between the president of Nigeria, who had also a Guinea passport. You know his background very well. He was a drug courier. So I don't know whether he's linked. But it is good that he has given this asylum to this gentleman who has come back to seek asylum. Asylum can be got anywhere if your life is in danger. Most of us had those 40 years ago when our lives were in danger. Today we are still here. But let me be very honest. the situation in that region is bad, and almost every opposition member leader will be fleeing because the Western Hemisphere have not seen Matanga's logic. I've told these people, Nigeria needs to be dismembered. The entire region depends on Nigeria. If Nigeria is sick, the region is sick. Therefore, look at that. And you people are still here saying you give asylum. How many people are we going to give asylum? Look at the Cameroon man, is in asylum. Another one is in asylum. The president himself of Mbalo is in asylum. So how many people are you going to give? Wrap out to Nigeria and the place will stabilize and the people will find their way. Nigeria is long overdue. It must be rearranged.
All right, let's move to Liberia now, Dr. Matsanga. The country has welcomed or received a deployment of surgeons from the Democratic Republic of Congo to help assist in their health efforts in Liberia. We know 12 have already been in the country of Liberia from the DRC. What exactly are they meant to be looking at and focus areas there?
Congo itself needs this. Though Asanda, when you are doing African stories, you at times in your studio, you must be laughing. Congo itself needs these doctors, but it is a good gesture for the Congolese doctors to earn a living in dollars in Liberia because it helps. It is also good African values for Africa to help its fellow African. But Congo itself, a short comment on that, Congo needs these doctors more than Liberia because Liberia is developed, its infrastructure is developed. In Congo, there are people who die of malaria because the doctors can't reach them. That is all the problem. Maybe that's why they have a surplus doctors.
As we talk of infrastructure, let's touch on Ghana. The country is looking to build its first nuclear power plant by 2027. What do we know in terms of what's in place now in plans moving forward?
I think that is a great step forward. Ghana's stability, Ghana's political stability gives it a good push. Ghana's political stability gives it infrastructure attraction for foreign complexes, for foreigners to come to invest, because the policies of Ghana government, especially President Mahama's policies, are very recruitive policies, good policies that allow investment. And Ghana itself, near Atlantic Ocean, a very good place, a very, very able. They need this power. You know, the complex of Ghana, the arrangement, the way Ghana was arranged, it is very, very good, able to spring up as one of the best countries in West Africa so far. So this is a welcome decision.
Of course, we know Africa is moving towards nuclear plants as a way of boosting its electricity efforts or gathering or garnering efforts. But in this particular project in Ghana, we don't know who the partner will be. It's still in beginning stages. However, we do know that there were experts in the country of Ghana from Pakistan, from Turkey, from the UK and the US. Who do you suspect will partner with Ghana on this project? It's a big one.
I think Britain will not lose Gold Coast. You remember it was named Gold Coast. And I think no African country will dare to employ Pakistani or Turkey. Although there are better people in building airports. Have you seen how Turkey built airports across Africa? Zambia. Go to Zambia. Go to Dar es Salaam. Go. And I don't think Pakistan will get it because it is on a watch list of the Americans. And Turkey is also on the watch list of the Americans. The British nuclear organization company will get it to build. It knows the terrain. It is their territory. It's a Commonwealth country. I think the British will get it. I support them.
It is also a World Bank initiative. So in terms of funding, does Ghana have capacity to pay back what they need to and to make sure that this project is completed in time, to make sure there are no losses?
Yes, and corruption in Ghana is not zero corruption. Zero. They don't tolerate corruption. I think that is Mahama's presidency is straightforward on that, and I'm happy that this is the way it can go. If it had been in any other African country, Asanda, I would get worried. But in Ghana, I think it will be in time, it will be utilized, the money from the World Bank will be utilized properly.
Dr. Matsanga, we'll leave it there for today, and thank you so much for joining us there in Mali.
I think you have left one serious question. Thank you very much of the coup in Guinea-Bissau. A coup is a coup.
We'll have to leave it there, and we are out of time completely. It's 6:30 Central African time. Let's get our news headlines now. Dr. David Matsanga is political scientist and conflict resolution analyst, talking to us about news making headlines in our West African region.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Police have arrested prominent Tunisian opposition figure Ayachi Hamami at his home to enforce a 5-year prison term on a conviction for conspiracy against state security. President Bola Tinubu has nominated Nigeria's former top general to replace the defense minister who resigned amid a surge in mass kidnappings and Islamist attacks in the north that has led the president to declare a security emergency. And more than 2/3 of the votes have been counted in Honduran presidential elections. The Liberal Party candidate is maintaining a slender lead over the right-winger who has been backed by President Donald Trump. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Ntsintsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Time now to check in with the world of sports. We get our first full bulletin for this Wednesday morning. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning from the sports desk. So South Africa's Banyana closed out 2025 in style with a 2-0 victory over Morocco in Agadir last night. Now second half goals from Mtandi as well as Ndoro Qesane sealed the win for Dr. Desiree Ellis's Chargers, who made about 3 changes from the team that beat the Democratic Republic of Congo in a WAFCON qualifier. Now captain Refrida Jane was forced off injured in the first half, replaced by Jessica Wade, while goalkeepers Andile Dlamini had dealt comfortably with Morocco's few chances. After goalless opening period, Banyana found their rhythm in the second half with Qesane as well as Mtandi striking to cap off a strong finish to the year 2025. Of course, both teams were using this match as well in preparation to next year's Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Meanwhile, Banyana forward Thembi Kgatlana has been nominated for the coveted Liga MX Femiliana Player of the Season award. It's a milestone that speaks not just of her brilliance up front, but to the consistency and influence that she has carried across continents. Playing for Tigres UANL, one of Mexico's most dominant women's football clubs, Kgatlana delivered a standout campaign with 8 goals in 17 matches. Her contributions helped the club also secure a 7th league title, extending their record as the most successful team in the competition's history. Back home now, South Africa's Proteas women's veteran Dane van Niekerk says she felt like a child again upon her official return to the national team ahead of the white ball inbound series against Ireland. Van Niekerk reversed her retirement decision from international cricket in August of this year after 2 years in the wilderness, and has now been called by coach Mandla Mashimbi for the first time since 2021. Now, the former captain, who was named Cricket South Africa Cricketer of the Year back in 2019, says she never thought the day would come where she gets to don the green and gold once again.
You know, if you asked me probably 6 months ago if I would be out, I'd probably say no. Yeah, just with everything that happened, and obviously I spoke to Amanda before that, but I didn't think the day would come. So obviously it means a lot. It means the world. That's what I said to coach and Clinton, the selector. Yeah, it's just again, I'm just excited. It's good to be back around the team. I got my clothes again, and I felt like it was my clothes for the first time. Got a new helmet as well. I was like a child. But that's what it means to me to be here, and hopefully I can really contribute to the team.
Now, Van Niekerk has not played for South Africa since September of 2021 against the West Indies and could be in the starting 11 in the first T20 of the series this coming Friday at Newlands in Cape Town in South Africa's Western Cape province. She says all she wants to do is to prove a point to herself and not to anyone else.
It's scary to think that it's 4 years. I know that thing was in West Indies, feels like a lifetime ago. You know, I was in and around the squad, obviously 2022, 2023, but yeah, no games. The thing for me is it's easy to say, oh, I want to prove a point and show people, oh, I'm still Van Niekerk or whatever people might think. But the main thing for me is to prove something to myself, you know, and I think that's the main goal is just proving to myself and really tick those boxes that I want to tick. And I know if I tick those boxes personally, I will contribute to the team I guess hopefully in winning situations, and that's what it's all about for me.
And finally, Serena Williams has filed the necessary paperwork for a return to tennis, but she said she's not coming back to the sport. Now, the American great, who won 23 Grand Slam singles titles, retired after the 2022 US Open tournament. The International Tennis Integrity Agency has confirmed to BBC Sport that Williams is back on the list of players registered for a drug test pooling. Her name also appears on the most recent document published by the organization on the 6th of October. So every retired player must make themselves available for out-of-competition testing for 6 months before they are eligible to compete professionally again. Williams was never a fan of the word retirement, preferring instead to say that she was evolving away from the sport back in 2022. And that's a wrap from the Sports Desk at the Sawa. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, send us an email. That's to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Or remember to call us as well on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Mosibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Tamo kutuli bwanji ndi Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. Join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Let's now find out for the first time on this Wednesday morning what's happening in the world of business. Here's Matapelo Mahape to update us.
Business news on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa says Mozambique is South Africa's largest trading partner on the African continent and the 4th in the world. Ramaphosa addressed a gala dinner in Maputo last night, adding the two nations are committed to growing this partnership in a mutually beneficial manner. President Ramaphosa is in Mozambique for the Binational Commission. He says many South African companies have invested in Mozambique.
After our session of the Binational Commission, we will attend the launch of yet another flagship project in energy, the Integrated Hydrocarbons Infrastructure Facility, a partnership between the government of Mozambique and one of our leading companies, Sasol.
And the Communication Workers Union CWU, alongside the Congress of South African Trade Unions COSATU in South Africa's Gauteng province, have handed over a memorandum of demands to the South African Broadcasting Corporation. The group staged a picket outside the corporation's headquarters in Auckland Park over the deregistration of the union at the SABC. The union is demanding the reinstatement of dismissed and suspended shop stewards, fair pay and an investigation into management's decision. They are also calling on the Ministry and Parliament to expedite the processing of the SABC bill and the establishment of a sustainable and reliable funding model for the public broadcaster. CWU leader Sthembisa Mkhwanazi says they also want clarity on who approved only 50% of the 2023-2024 back pay agreement.
We call for an investigation on unilateral decisions by management, including the Group HR to implement only 50% of the 2023-2024 back pay that was fought for and signed between the SABC and some of the members of CW task team. We demand to know who on behalf of CW gave the go-ahead or signed the 50% deal with management back in 2023 back pay.
And there's good news for Itala depositors who have been unable to access their funds from the institution since January 2025. South Africa's National Treasury has announced that it will make up over $128 million available to enable the payment of Itala bank depositors. This follows consultations with the KwaZulu-Natal government. The payout process is set to begin on Monday next week. FNB, which has been appointed as the bank that will make payments, will reach out to Itala recipients via SMS. Recipients are not required to open a bank account with FNB if they don't already have one. Itala recipients have until 2028 to get their money back through this process. And on to this now, Malawi has embraced the use of drones along its borders with Mozambique, Zambia and Tanzania to combat smuggling, which has negatively affected national revenue collection. This initiative follows a report from the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, to the government indicating that efforts to maximize revenue collection are being hampered by widespread smuggling. The initiative, dubbed Drone Border Surveillance, is a part of the Southern African Trade Connectivity Project funded by the World Bank Group. Brian Kampaje elaborates.
Every small effort to curb or control smuggling of goods into Malawi, illegal exports, is a welcome development. This is an effective deterrent measure, force compliance, and increase the tax revenue for both import and export duty and taxes. The program should, however, be monitored and evaluated to ensure that whatever is spent is not more than what is collected.
And Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić says that the country's only oil refinery is set to close. He said the United States had not responded to a request to temporarily lift the sanctions on the NIS plant, which is mostly owned by Russia. The BBC's Guy Delaney has the report.
President Aleksandar Vučić said the US was only concerned with its geopolitical interests, while the Russian majority owners of NIS didn't want to sell. Serbia and its people are stuck in the middle, with fuel supplies only until the middle of January. NIS provides more than 80% of Serbia's petrol and diesel, as well as almost all its jet and heavy fuels. From October, US sanctions stopped crude deliveries to its refinery. Serbia had asked for a temporary reprieve until new ownership could be arranged, but Washington seems unwilling to budge.
And a look at your financial indicators. $1 in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 443. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 88. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 30. And in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 88. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 34. Russia, it's 77 rubles 40. India, it's 89 rupees 54. While in China, it's 70 yuan 7. And in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 9 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound, and $1.86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,224 and platinum at $1,638 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.45 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapela Mahape.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Start your day right with Channel Africa Breakfast.
That smells delicious.
Live, 5 days a week.
It's about 30 seconds shy of 6:45 Central African time. We take a look at this story now. In Malawi, the country has embraced the use of drones along its borders with Mozambique, Zambia and Tanzania to combat smuggling, which has negatively affected national revenue collection. This initiative follows a report from the Malawi Revenue Authority, or the MRA, to the government, indicating that efforts to maximize revenue collection are being hampered by widespread smuggling. The initiative, dubbed Drone Border Surveillance, is part of the Southern Africa Trade Connectivity Project funded by the World Bank Group. George Mango reports from Blantyre, Malawi's commercial capital.
The Malawi government, through the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, is introducing this key monitoring system, hoping to apprehend traders who import goods through uncharted routes. Authorities have noted that for years, Lilongwe has lost millions through tax evasion, especially smuggling. Apart from traders undervaluing and underdeclaring goods when clearing them at the borders, the major revenue loss has come from those who bring goods into the country using unauthorized routes. It is no wonder that Malawian authorities have been under intense pressure to find ways to deal with the smugglers of taxable goods along the borders with Zambia, Mozambique and Tanzania. Budding business entrepreneur Brian Kampanje was upbeat that government will be able to collect the much-needed revenue, which ended up in the hands of non-patriotic Malawians.
Every small effort to curb or control smuggling of goods into Malawi, illegal exports, is a welcome development. This is an effective deterrent measure, force compliance, and increase the tax revenue for both import and export duty and taxes. The program should, however, be monitored and evaluated to ensure that whatever is spent is not more than what is collected. Because if we spend more to enforce compliance through these small smugglers, then perhaps it is not ideal to roll it out on a larger scale. Probably this could be because the real smuggling happens at the official borders.
During the last financial year, the tax collecting body failed to reach its target, which forced the government to borrow from commercial banks at unpalatable interest rates. Now the government has introduced the drone border surveillance system to track down smugglers and save millions that can be used to provide basic amenities. Drone operating expert Kampata Nyirongo was quick to call for ethical standards while hailing the move.
We should expect that data and information that is being gathered in the borders should be of high quality. It also helps to reduce risk to personnel. Deploying human beings into, for example, dangerous border areas might pose a risk to the health and safety of the deployed officials. But with the drones, that risk is therefore taken out. One thing, though, that we need to be mindful of is that we should make sure that we don't abuse the system. Because I always argue and say that any system is as good as the people who are using it.
As of this week, the government has informed Malawians that since the launch of this initiative funded by the World Bank Group, 421 arrests have been made and goods worth millions of Malawi kwacha have been intercepted through the use of the drone border surveillance system. Using drones has excited a Blantyre-based city resident, James Perry, who says authorities will now be able to collect more revenue and build schools or health facilities.
The use of drones in detecting smuggling is a good development because it will greatly assist in increasing revenue for our country. I expect that through this initiative, we will have significant increase in the revenue that MRA collects for our national coffers. However, apart from this being an initiative that can effectively curb corruption, because physical borders and custom checkpoints are susceptible to corruption because of the involvement of human beings. So the use of drones to detect smuggled goods is welcome, but we should make sure that the smuggled goods detected by the drones are accurately and transparently reported.
Malawian authorities began equipping drone operators from the Malawi Revenue Authority with the necessary knowledge and skills. The pilot phase of the drones started before the end of 2022 with a phase-based concept which included stakeholder engagements with local chiefs, paramount chiefs, and public meetings. George Mhango, Channel Africa News, Blantyre.
Right, it's just 6:50 Central African time now. Remember, you can get in touch with us. We welcome that. On our various social media platforms, we're literally everywhere. Our handle is at Channel Africa 1. You can find us on X, on Facebook, on Instagram, on TikTok, on LinkedIn. And this is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Nkhanza zokhudza amuna ndi azimayi kapena kuti gender-based violence GBV zikuwononga mioyo komanso kuphwasula midzi. Zikuchitika m'manyumba, m'masukulu, malo ogwirira ntchito ndipo kwambiri mwakachetechete. Koma sizikuyenera kupitirira. Mukazimva yankhulani. Ngati mwakhuzidwa funani chithandizo. Chifukwa kusachita chilichonse sikuthandiza. Mverani kuma wireless onse 14 a SABC kuchokera lachitatu pa 23 mwezi uno wa Julai kuti mumve zokambirana, malangizo, masewero, zionetsero za maphunziro ndi mafunso okhuza nkhanza za amuna ndi azimayi ndi akatswiri, anthu opulumuka ku nkhanzazi, kukhazikitsa lamulo komanso dziko lonse lokhuzidwa ndi nkhanzazi. Zonsezi pa wireless yomwe mumayikonda ya SABC. Imbirani pa nambala 0800 428 428 kuti munene za nkhanzazi kapena kupeza chithandizo. Nkhanza zokhuza amuna ndi azimayi zimatha ndi inu. Kutenga kukufikani kuchokera ku SABC.
Your morning companion with the stories that matter. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
Another story that matters is President Cyril Ramaphosa, who is in Maputo, is there for the 4th South Africa-Mozambique Binational Commission. This is a platform aimed at strengthening political, economic and security cooperation between the two neighbors. Over the next 2 days, the president will hold bilateral talks, address the opening session of the BNC, and later officiate at the launch of a major Sasol energy project in Inhambane. To help us unpack the significance of this visit and what South Africa hopes to achieve via it, we're joined by the President's spokesperson, Vincent Magwenya. Vincent, good morning to you and thanks for making time.
Good morning, Asanda, and good morning to your listeners.
So let's start with the big picture, the significance of this binational commission, especially during this time. What is it?
Well, the significance of the binational commission, in fact, I must add that this is the 4th binational commission between Mozambique and South Africa. You could call it a premier coordinating mechanism of the bilateral relationship between the two countries. And you have a number of elements that are coordinated within that mechanism. And those elements emanate from agreements and memoranda of understanding that have been signed by the two countries, from areas such as customs to health, to transport, defense, and other areas of cooperation, trade, which is also very important and is going to feature quite prominently during this visit, and the BNC.
So as you mentioned then, those major issues that are on the table, we also know that Mozambique is South Africa's biggest trading partner on the continent. What concrete outcomes is South Africa hoping to secure around the trade you mentioned and other types of investment?
Indeed, Mozambique globally is South Africa's fifth largest export destination. There's a great deal of trade that takes place between the two countries. In 2024, for example, South Africa's exports to Mozambique totaled about 19.4 billion rands, compared to a lesser number in 2023, which was at 18.9 billion. One of the key outcomes that are going to be achieved out of this visit are agreements on the future sustainability of energy. As you know, Mozambique is well endowed with natural gas, and part of the outcome out of the officiating of the opening of the Sasol plant is that once that plant is fully operational, the structure out of that plant will service both the Mozambican domestic markets as well as the South African market. And so we're looking at energy sustainability between the two countries, which is important in powering the respective economies.
And on that, energy being a major focus, especially you cite the example of Sasol and a project launch in Temane there. How does this fit into South Africa's broader regional energy strategy? You mentioned how it fits into Mozambique and South Africa as bilateral relations, but regionally?
Well, it does fit. It talks to our integrated resource energy plan as South Africa, but it also talks to the supply of gas and energy in a sustainable form to our neighbors as well. When you look at these kinds of projects, they tend to have regional spin-offs. In terms of the value chain benefits, not just the supply of energy alone. And so there will be a great deal of benefit to the entire region.
Let's talk security cooperation. In Cabo Delgado, there have been some standing concerns there on that. Will this BNC move that discussion forward in any new way?
There are various elements of security that are going to be discussed, including the prevention of transport crimes, as well as the sort of general situation with respect to peace and stability in Mozambique. In particular, the issues related to Cabo Delgado. As you know, SADC had a peacekeeping mission there, which prominently featured the South African Defence Force. That mission has been unwinded and has come to an end, and so there will be an opportunity for the President and his delegation to be appraised of the latest development in that part of the country.
We've seen a large ministerial delegation traveling with President Cyril Ramaphosa. What does that signal then about the scope of and the ambition of these engagements?
Well, it signals the level of importance that is attached to Mozambique as a neighbor as well as a trading partner, but also a country where there is a lot of political alignment with South Africa. It further signals areas of cooperation and areas of future cooperation. Some of the ministers will be signing agreements with the counterparts in this regard, and in some cases they will be looking at further deepening cooperation, as you can see from the figures as well as the export status of Mozambique. It is certainly an important market for South Africa, and it's an important trading partner. Therefore, a delegation of this nature talks to the significance of the partnership with Mozambique and the importance of the relationship in total.
In closing, Vincent, what should South Africans expect in terms of takeaways once this BNC concludes?
Well, we should expect further strengthened cooperation, which will emanate in various areas of cooperation, as well as benefits to the South African and the regional economy, as you alluded earlier on. The number of issues, opportunities, and challenges that South Africa and Mozambique have to navigate through, issues of climate and so on. And so South Africans should expect more concrete actions on these matters as they are approached by both countries.
Thank you so much again for your time. We appreciate it, Vincent.
Thank you.
That's Vincent Magwenya, spokesperson to South African President Cyril Ramaphosa, giving us an update in terms of his meeting. That is the President Ramaphosa's meeting in Maputo, Mozambique, there to strengthen political, economic, and social security cooperation ties with that country.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
7 o'clock Central African time it is. It is Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa. My name is Asanda Beda, and Peter Ndoro, our partner in crime, not here with us today, so I'm riding solo. We'll let you know what's coming up in the next hour of the show in just a bit. On www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us. Open View, channel 628 as well. Let's hand you over to the news desk. Here's Onel Nsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Police have arrested prominent Tunisian opposition figure Ayachi Hamami at his home to enforce a 5-year prison term on a conviction for conspiracy against state security. An appeals court handed down jail terms of up to 45 years last week to dozens of opposition leaders, including Hamami, business figures and lawyers on charges of conspiracy to overthrow President Kais Saied. Critics call the sentences a sign of Saied's increasingly authoritarian rule. The opposition, meanwhile, says the charges are fabricated and aim to crush Saied's critics through the judiciary. President Bola Tinubu has nominated Nigeria's former top general to replace the defense minister. Christopher Musa resigned amid a surge in mass kidnappings and Islamist attacks in the north that has led to the president to declare security emergency. Musa served as Nigeria's chief of defense staff from 2023 until October this year. He will succeed Muhammad Badaru Abubakar, a former regional governor who stepped down as defense minister on Monday, citing health reasons. The National Assembly in South Africa has adopted a report of the Rules Committee that establishes a committee that will play oversight over the presidency. The report was adopted with objection of one opposition party. The African National Congress Party Deputy Chief Whip Doris Mpapane says the argument to establish this committee first arose on the 6th Parliament and later found expression in the report of the State Capture Commission. There are also changes to the procedure of oral replies, and the time allocated for ministers to answer questions in the House has been increased. These changes will kick off in next year. Mpapane says these reforms set South Africa's parliament apart from other parliaments.
The proposed committee is expected to focus on the budget and administration of the presidency and to call a member of the executive delegated by the president to account therefor. In this way, it will function in a similar way to a portfolio committee. But the rules also permit the committee to call on the president and deputy president once every year to discuss policy matters of national and international importance.
The diplomatic spat between South Africa and the U.S. continues to intensify. The United States has not invited Pretoria to the first G20 Shepherds meeting to be held in the U.S. The meeting is set to take place on the 15th and 16th in Washington. This exclusion of South Africa comes after the Trump administration boycotted the G20 summit held in South Africa 2 weeks ago, citing genocide of Afrikaners. The U.S. took over the G20 presidency from South Africa yesterday. Sophie Mokoena reports.
In the invitation to the members of the G20, Washington has made it clear that South Africa will not be invited to the Shepherds meeting before end of the year. Pretoria anticipated this hostility, and as much as the country is a founding member of the G20, Pretoria is expected to channel its energies on the next host, that is the United Kingdom. In 2027, President Trump's hostility against South Africa will likely escalate next year. However, the U.S. will hold the midterm elections later next year, just before the G20 Leaders Summit.
And lastly, more than 2/3 of the votes have been counted in the Honduran presidential election. The Liberal Party candidate is maintaining a slender lead over the right-winger who's been backed by President Donald Trump. The advantage held by Salvador Nasrallah is less than 1 percentage point, the BBC's Will Grant reports.
I think Hondurans expected it would be a tight race. I think very few thought it would go this close. And now Salvador Nasrallah, with a little over 2/3 of the votes counted, fractionally in the lead. But there's expectations that could hand back again to Mr. Asanda, who is Donald Trump's favoured candidate. It could stay as it is. This is going to be a long night and potentially long few days for Hondurans. They really wanted clarity to avoid any sense of either post-electoral violence or a disputed election result that would involve lots of legal challenges and recounts if it stays this close.
For any news stories you'd like to share with us, please send us an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us at +27 11 714 4459. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
The seminar brings
sports headlines.
Coming up in your sports news this hour, Erling Haaland sets a new record in the Premier League while Banyana defeats the Atlas Lionesses of Morocco in a friendly match by 2-0 to end the year on a high. Details of these and other stories coming up at 7:30.
All right, let's see what's coming up in this hour of the show. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa. And in northern Mozambique, we were speaking about Mozambique. We go back to that country. Earlier in the hour, we were talking about South Africa's visit to that country for bilateral relations. Now, we'll be looking at escalating conflict in Mozambique that has forced tens of thousands to flee, leaving host communities and humanitarian agencies under severe strain. Also in Guinea-Bissau, the Electoral Commission in that country has said it cannot finalize the presidential election results after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes after the wake of a military takeover and the ousting of president there, and tensions arising in that country. We'll find out about those stories and more. This is Rise and Shine. My name is Asanda Beda. On www.channelafrica.co.za is where you can connect with us. Also on the SABC Plus app via mobile phones.
Africa. It's time to plug into the heartbeat of the continent. Tune in to Channel Africa, your go-to radio station that broadcasts in 5 different languages.
L'Afrique du Sud célèbre la journée nationale du
Kabla hujaitwa kwa jina la Double K,
or more of our forests have been destroyed.
Partido Africano da Independência da Guiné.
See, Channel Africa represents every corner of this amazing land. From Lagos to Cape Town, Nairobi to Dakar, we've got you covered with the freshest news, music, and cultures. So, turn up the volume, feel the rhythm. And Join the conversation. Channel Africa, the African perspective. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam, rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
In northern Mozambique, escalating conflict has forced tens of thousands to flee, leaving host communities and humanitarian agencies under severe strain. Many families lack basic food, water and shelter, while insecurity hampers aid delivery. UNHCR warns that $38.2 million will be needed in 2026 to support displaced families and overstretched communities. Joining us this morning is Isadora Zoni, who is Communication Officer at the UNHCR in Mozambique, to discuss the latest situation. Isadora, thank you for joining us. How are you?
Thank you. Thank you for having me. I think it's a great opportunity to maybe bring some light into what's happening here in northern Mozambique. So thank you very much.
Absolutely, and it is our pleasure. Can you start by giving us a quick picture of what's happening on the ground in northern Mozambique as we speak?
Certainly, certainly. I think what's worrying us right now is that the conflict that's been ongoing since 2017 and has already displaced 1.3 million people has now spilled over into areas that were once secure. So many of these areas were once areas of hosting communities, people receiving people displaced from Cabo Delgado. And now we have seen in the last 2 weeks, 100,000 people displaced. So it's really concerning, and we are seeing people arriving with really nothing, many children separated from their parents, because when the flight happens, a lot of distress and a lot of people running around. So many children unaccompanied, and also elderly, people with disabilities, the aggravation of gender-based violence for women and girls. So the situation on the ground, it's really concerning.
You mentioned that local communities are really feeling the pressure. What do things look like for those who are families hosting those displaced people?
So I was just yesterday there in Nampula, in Nerati, and what you see, for example, is one house receiving some other 30 people. And these are not people that they know. These are people who they saw that were out there, that have children, that have babies, that have elderly, and that they just out of solidarity decided to host. But it is really difficult when you have also very little, having to receive and to try to find ways to take care of this people who you're trying to host, but at the same time splitting over the limited resources that you already have. So, and this is only in addition to those who are at the reception centers, staying in classrooms. Some of the people even sleeping just under some of the trees who are there, which are there at the courtyard.
That figure given of $38.2 million by the UNHCR in terms of what's needed by 2026, what would that help you able to do on the ground?
So normally we say that UNHCR, we do protection, but what does protection mean? Protection is access to rights. So we're talking here about protection of women and girls, community engagement. We're talking here about dignity kits. We're talking here about some of these non-food items. We're talking about also strengthening some of the community structures so that this spurts of solidarity, livelihoods, it's really many different things, from the basic emergency when we're talking about the distribution of that blanket that is required to, let's say, when people as we have people on the ground also displaced for years now, so that they can have a chance to establish themselves, to have access to livelihoods, and always with this lens of protection of those who are most vulnerable. So we're talking about the elderly, we're talking about the people with disability, we're talking about the women and girls. So really it's about getting and ensuring that these people can access their rights and have a life that is just a dignity, is at the center of their life as well.
And if this funding does not get gathered, what will this mean then for those host communities? And are there any examples of local communities trying to do their bit to help?
No, certainly, this is one of the challenges that we have right now with the response, because in 2025, we've only managed to get 50% of the funding that was required based on the needs that were observed on the ground. So this means that right now, at the end of the year, all of the humanitarian actors on the ground are overstretched. So the response is very limited, and unfortunately, this means sometimes people deciding to go back to a situation of insecurity, maybe trying to go back home, even when the conditions are not on the ground, just because they can't overstay their welcome, meaning that if they're staying, they're not receiving any support, and this just makes it much harder for the communities and much more exposed to these vulnerabilities.
Isadora, we'll leave it there for now. Thanks again for your insights and this update.
Most welcome. Thank you very much.
Thanks. Isadora Zoni is Communication Officer at the UNHCR in Mozambique, sharing key insights on the urgent humanitarian situation in northern Mozambique.
Bringing you the energy, news, and good vibes to kickstart your day. This is Rise and Shine on Channel Africa.
So the G20 presidency, our time now being 14 minutes past 7 Central African time, the United States has effectively blocked South Africa from taking part in next week's Sherpa meeting, citing claims widely dismissed as false that white South Africans are being persecuted. The Sherpa meeting forms the first round of discussions ahead of the next G20 cycle, following Washington's decision to skip the leaders' summit held in Johannesburg last month. For more on this, let's talk now to Dr. Joseph Upile Matola, head of the Economic Resilience and Inclusion Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, or SAIA. Dr. Upile Matola, thank you for joining us.
Thank you very much.
Do you foresee any economic ties or risks, rather, for South Africa if it's excluded from these early G20 discussions?
Yes, I think there would be some economic risks. In the short term, the risks are mostly in the message that this exclusion would send to potential investors. Because it sends a message that the relationship between South Africa and the US is continuing to deteriorate further. So that sends a wrong message to investors, and that's where the risk in the short term would come in. In the longer term, I think the risks is not just for South Africa, but for Africa in general, because these earlier meetings that the United States has to convene will help shape the agenda for the rest of the U.S. presidency of the G20. And if you're not included in these meetings, if you're not at the table, you'll not be able to help shape this agenda or to push the interests that you have. In this case, the South African interest as well as the interests of South Africa as a continent.
As you
So
mentioned, the
let's
short-term
remember
and
that
long-term effects and how our trade relationships will be affected. Can we even call this a U.S.-South Africa tension? Because it seems the U.S. is the one with the problem and South Africa doesn't. Can we call it tension?
yeah, we can call it tension, but like you rightly put it, it is essentially the U.S. Making accusations and using those false accusations as the basis for hostilities, for pushing further hostilities with South Africa. But it still has implications for South Africa and for the US. But for South Africa being the smaller economy, it doesn't matter who is right and who is wrong. It's going to affect the economy and affect the ordinary human beings.
These persecution claims, in terms of how they can test investor confidence in South Africa's economy, will it result, as you see it, in relationships being strained forever?
I think the claim itself that there's a persecution of based on race, or that there's white genocide in South Africa, I think the claim itself does not really dent investor confidence, because investors are very smart people. They do their due diligence before they invest in any country, and it wouldn't take much research for them to understand that these are false claims, that their investments will be safe, that their investments would not be at risk just because they're of a certain race. It would not take much for them to understand that South Africa is a safe place to come and invest. But again, where these claims can cause damage is on the confidence that South Africa and the United States will be able to come to some ceasing of the hostilities, and will be able to come to some major deals. I mean, some trade deals that has been eluding the two countries since President Trump started with hostilities.
Dr. Matola, we'll leave it there for now. Thank you so much for your valuable insights.
Thank you very much for having me.
Pleasure. Dr. Joseph Upile Matola is head of the Economic Resilience and Inclusion Program at the South African Institute of International Affairs, SAIA, talking to us about the G20 presidency, that is the United States, having effectively blocked South Africa from taking part in next week's Sherpa meeting. Of course, these Sherpa meetings happen on the sidelines of, or the build-up to, the main G20 meetings. And the U.S. is citing claims, which have obviously been widely dismissed as false, that white South Africans are being persecuted in South Africa.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. Because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday, 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Mornings made better with Peter and Asanda on Rise and Shine, weekdays 6 till 9 Central African Time on Channel Africa.
Let's go to Guinea-Bissau now, a topic we touched on earlier with our resident analyst in terms of what's happening in the West African region of news and current affairs. And we talked the Electoral Commission in Guinea-Bissau, which has said now it cannot finalize the presidential election results after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes in the wake of a military takeover, the ousting of the president, and rising tensions in the country. To help us understand the implications of this stalled election, we're joined by Professor Douglas Yates, who is a political scientist specializing in African politics at the American Graduate School in Paris. Professor Yates, always great catching up with you. How are you on this particular Wednesday?
Well, we're doing great here in Paris. We've had a bit of cool weather, but it's so wonderful. I hope everything's fine down where you are in South Africa.
Absolutely. It's fine here. Thank you. Great to hear that. Let's start here, Professor. How significant is it that the Electoral Commission cannot finalize the results of these elections in Guinea-Bissau? And what does this mean for the country's democratic process?
Well, we're watching a crime being committed with our eyes wide open. So let me just explain that this coup, by all indications, is not a legitimate coup. That is, in Gabon, you had a coup. The military took the president, held him under arrest for over a year, and took power. In Mali, you had a coup. The president was arrested, the military took over. In Guinea, you had a coup. the president was arrested. Those are normal coups. What we have here is an auto golpe, a self coup. Let me explain. The current president has already staged 2 fake coups. That is, he himself is complicit in those coups. He staged them so that he could dissolve the parliament. And the reason was he doesn't have a majority in the parliament. He's consistently lost general elections in his own country. He won 1 presidential election, which was contested 6 years ago. And since then, he has staged a series of auto golpe. So these are not real coups. He's complicit with the coup plotters. The first 2 times he used it to dissolve the parliament, and this time he used it apparently to annul the elections because the opposition, the PAIGC, that is the former longtime ruling party of which he was a member. He had been a PAIGC prime minister before he was president. That party apparently won these elections. And so with his complicity, soldiers in the regime declared that drug mafia, drug lords, collaborating with some unnamed political parties, were preparing to stage a coup. And then they briefly held him for 1 day and released him. First sign that this is not a real coup. 1 day after staging a coup, they released him to Senegal, and then he made his way very comfortably to Congo Brazzaville. Second sign, they unidentified armed men wearing balaclava without uniforms, but clearly armed men, soldiers, stormed into the PAIGC headquarters, the opposition party headquarters, and smashed everything up and arrested people. And then after that, on December 2nd, they raided the Electoral Commission, arrested 5 members of the Supreme Court, and destroyed all of the ballots. Now, either these are independent actors who are wandering around Guinea-Bissau wreaking havoc, or they're exactly the military regime. A real coup wouldn't need to do that. But if the idea is to not allow the current president, or the supposedly overthrown president, Umaro Embalo, if the idea is to say he didn't lose the elections, then this will be a third piece of evidence that this is the 3rd fake coup in Guinea-Bissau since 2020.
So how does this latest situation then fit into this pattern that we've seen happening in Guinea-Bissau and maybe even other parts of the continent with these coups? If it is a fake coup, but yet has still managed to achieve some instability.
Yeah. So what we've seen is a general decline in democracy, that is, in democratic practices, where people use democratic institutions in order to undermine the Constitution. And at the same time, we see that people in these countries still have a very strong preference for democratic rule. So sometimes the term is, instead of fake coup, which isn't really a good political science term, a constitutional coup. And it's the kind of thing we're seeing in the United States, where having been elected, the president of the United States is using all of the means at his disposal to undermine democracy. So in some countries in West Africa, you simply have the use of violence, and then a junta occupies the offices. In others, and this is what the president of Guinea has been attempting since 2019, you try to move towards a hybrid regime. That is, increase autocratic practices, censor the press so you don't have free media, arrest your opposition. In this case in Guinea, they disqualified the PAIGC, the longtime ruling party, kind of like the ANC for Guinea-Bissau. This was the party that had fought the war for independence and came to power. They disqualified them. They simply said, oh, you didn't file your papers on time. They disqualified the candidate of the PAIGC. So another feature of hybrid regimes is you you do this all in a very civilian fashion. You say, "Oh, I'm sorry, you didn't get the paperwork in. You can't run in the election." They also then tend to get rid of term limits, so you have presidents for life. They do electioneering. They silence critics. They arrest the media, and then they make it look like a civilian government. Here, it just didn't work, and so they staged a coup.
Regional actors like Nigeria are offering protection to some opposition leaders. Can those kinds of interventions help or exacerbate this type of situation?
Oh, regional security organization can help a lot. In fact, ECOWAS, the West African regional organization, had a military mission in Guinea-Bissau. And when President Mbalo came to power, he invited them to leave. And you see, without those West African soldiers there, he and plotters in the military have been able to stage a coup d'etat. Several. The first two were called attempted coups, but actually they were quite successful because they were used as pretexts to dissolve the parliament. And the third one is absolutely successful because now we have an interim president who is a general. I should mention that President Mbalo is himself a brigadier general. That is, before he became prime minister and president, he was a professional soldier, a member of the military, and deeply complicit. So yes, West Africa could do something, but they're sitting here. It's like triage. They're in the emergency ward with coup d'etats to the left and to the right, and they're trying as best as they can to stop the bleeding. But really, the failure here is the United States is not playing its watchdog role, backing up the West African community, with the Trump administration attacking our allies like Nigeria. It sends a clear message to opportunistic military men that this is the moment to seize power. What will be interesting is to see if the military decides, having taken power, to hold new elections and invite President Mbalo back. If that's so, that would be the fourth, and I consider convicting piece of evidence that he was not the victim of this coup, as he declared publicly on the world media, but one of the conspirators.
Right, Professor Yates, we'll leave it there for now. We appreciate your time very much. Professor Douglas Yates is a political scientist specializing in African politics at the American Graduate School in Paris, helping us unpack the latest in Guinea-Bissau. 7:30 Central African Time. Let's say good morning to Onele Nzinzi. She has our headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
I thank you, Asanda. The Electoral Commission in Guinea-Bissau has said it cannot finalize the presidential election results after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes in the wake of a military takeover, the ousting of the president, and rising tension in the country. President Bola Tinubu has nominated Nigeria's former top general to replace the defense minister. Christopher Musa resigned amid a surge in mass kidnappings and Islamist attacks in the north of the country. And authorities in Indonesia are rushing to get aid to communities in Sumatra that remains cut off more than a week after a heavy rain began lashing the island. Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Nzinzi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
We get the latest from the world of sports now. Here's Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. We'll start here. So FIFA is set to press ahead with plans to introduce VAR checks on corner kicks at the 2026 FIFA World Cup, despite domestic leagues rejecting the idea for wider use. So at October's IFIB meeting, football's lawmakers agreed that VAR could be expanded to cover incorrect second yellow cards, but rejected FIFA's proposal to review corners. Now that means the World Football Governing Body will effectively create a trial for the tournament in the USA, Mexico, as well as Canada next year. FIFA has often tested innovations at its competitions, including semi-automated offside technology, as well as referees announcing VAR decision to the crowd, and could also use the same mechanisms to begin reviewing corners. On the continent now, South Africa's Banyana closed out 2025 in style with a 2-0 victory over Morocco in Agadir last night. Now, second half goals from Nonhlanhla Mthandi as well as Noxolo Cesana sealed the win for Dr. Desiree Ellis' side, who made 3 changes from the team that beat the DR Congo in the WAFCON qualifiers. Now, captain Refilwe Jane was forced off injured in the first half, replaced by Jessica Wade, while goalkeeper Andile Dlamini dealt comfortably with Morocco's few chances. After goalless opening period, Banyana found their rhythm in the second half, with Cesana as well as Mthandi striking to cap off a strong finish to the year. Both teams, by the way, were using this preparation match as a part of their preparation, should I say, to the Women's Africa Cup of Nations tournament that is taking place in Morocco in March of next year. Further afield now, Erling Haaland has written his name into Premier League history, becoming the fastest player to reach 100 goals. The Manchester City striker struck in the first half of Tuesday's thrilling 5-4 win over Fulham at Craven Cottage, taking his tally to a century in just 111 league appearances. Haaland shattered the previous record held by Alan Shearer, who needed just 124 matches to reach the milestone during his time at Newcastle as well as Blackburn Rovers. Meanwhile, in another match that was played last night, Everton snatched a narrow 1-0 win over Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium, ending the hosts' unbeaten run. That defeat also extends Bournemouth's winless run in the Premier League to 5 matches now, just days after they squandered a 2-goal lead to lose 3-2 to Sutherland. Well, South Africa's Proteas women's veteran Dane van Niekerk says she felt like a child again upon her official return to the national team camp ahead of the white ball inbound series against Ireland. Van Niekerk reversed her retirement from the international cricket in August of this year after 2 years in the wilderness, and has been called up now by coach Mandla Mashimbi for the first time since 2021. Now, the former captain, who was named Cricket South Africa's Women's Cricketer of the Year back in 2019, says she never thought the day would come where she gets to don the green and gold again.
You know, if you asked me probably 6 months ago if I would be out, I'd probably say no. Yeah, just with everything that happened, and obviously I spoke to Amanda before that, but I didn't think the day would come. So obviously it means a lot. It means the world. That's what I said to coach and Clinton, the selector. Yeah, it's just. Again, I'm just excited. It's good to be back around the team. I got my clothes again, and I felt like it was my clothes for the first time. Got a new helmet as well. I was like a child. But that's what it means to me to be here, and yeah, hopefully I can really contribute to the team.
And Van, in tennis news, Serena Williams has filed the necessary paperwork for a return to tennis, but she said she is not coming back to the sport. Now, the American great, who won 23 Grand Singles titles, retired after the 2022 US Open tournament. Now, the International Tennis Integrity Agency confirmed to BBC Sport that Williams is back on the list of players registered for the drug testing pool. Her name also appears on the most recent document published by the organization on the 6th of October. So, for perspective, every retired player must make themselves available for out-of-competition testing for 6 months before they are eligible to compete professionally again. Williams, by the way, was never a fan of the word retirement, preferring instead to say that she was evolving away from the sport back in 2022. Well, it's 7:37 a.m. Central African Time, and concludes your sports news this hour. For any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za. Give us a call as well on +27 11714 4459. More sporting updates in the third and final hour of Africa Rise and Shine. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African perspective. Africa Update on Channel Africa with Lulu Kabu.
Mozambique's opposition leader Venancio Mondlane has been charged with incitement to terrorism and disobedience. He faces a total of 5 charges. The charges relate to post-election violence that left hundreds of people dead. What punishment is he looking at?
The most severe charges are 2. One is incitement for terrorism, and also is being charged for mobilizing people for terrorism during the protests. These charges are really serious and severe. If he is condemned, is found guilty, he could serve 10 years plus years in jail, meaning that he would be banned from political participation, mainly for the 2028 and 2029 electoral cycle.
The director of CDD, the Center for Democracy and Development, Adriano Novunga.
Africa Update with Lulu Kabu, 12 to 1 p.m. Central African Time.
At Channel Africa 1 is our handle where you can get in touch with us on social media. We also live stream on YouTube via that. Just a reminder to you to get in touch. And now let's check in with the world of business. Here's Matapelo Mahape with our latest.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. President Cyril Ramaphosa says Mozambique is South Africa's largest trading partner on the African continent and the 4th in the world. Ramaphosa addressed a gala dinner in Maputo last night, adding the two nations are committed to growing this partnership in a mutually beneficial manner. President Ramaphosa is in Mozambique for the Binational Commission. He says many South African companies have invested in Mozambique.
After our session of the Binational Commission, we will attend the launch of yet another flagship project in energy, the Integrated Hydrocarbons Infrastructure Facility, a partnership between the government of Mozambique and one of our leading companies, Sasol.
And South Africa's Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources has announced that the fuel prices will increase from today. Both grades of petrol will increase by 29 South African cents per litre. Both grades of diesel will go up by between 65 South African cents and 85 South African cents per litre. Meanwhile, eliminating paraffin will be nearly 1 South African rand more expensive, while liquefied petroleum gas will increase by 24 South African cents. The department spokesperson, Robert Make.
The reason for these adjustments are the average Brent crude oil prices decreased slightly during the period under review, and the rand appreciated against the dollar during the same period. The international product prices of petrol and diesel were also affected by lower inventories ahead of the winter season in the northern hemisphere, as well as the planned and unplanned refinery shutdowns in Europe as they prepare for their winter season.
And Malawi has embraced the use of drones along its borders with Mozambique, Zambia and Tanzania to combat smuggling, which has negatively affected national revenue collection. This initiative follows a report from the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, to government, indicating that efforts to maximize revenue collection are being hampered by widespread smuggling. The initiative, dubbed Drone Border Surveillance, is part of the Southern African Trade Connectivity Project, funded by the World Bank Group. Brian Kampaji explains.
Every small effort to curb or control smuggling of goods into Malawi, illegal exports, is a welcome development. This is an effective deterrent measure, force compliance, and increase the tax revenue for both import and export duty and taxes. The program should, however, be monitored and evaluated to ensure that whatever is spent is not more than what is collected.
And Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić says that the country's only oil refinery is set to close, but said the United States had not responded to a request to temporarily lift sanctions on the NIS plant, which is mostly owned by Russia. The BBC's Guy Dolany reports.
President Aleksandar Vučić said the US was only concerned with its geopolitical interests, while the Russian majority owners of NIS didn't want to sell. Serbia and its people are stuck in the middle, with fuel supplies only until the middle of January. Nice provides more than 80% of Serbia's petrol and diesel, as well as almost all its jet and heavy fuels. From October, US sanctions stopped crude deliveries to its refinery. Serbia had asked for a temporary reprieve until new ownership could be arranged, but Washington seems unwilling to budge.
And onto this now, an acute global shortage of memory chips is forcing artificial intelligence and consumer electronics companies to fight for dwindling supplies. This as prices soar for the unglamorous but essential components that allow devices to store data. Japanese electronics stores have begun limiting how many hard disk drives shoppers can buy. Chinese smartphone makers have warned of price increases. Tech giants including Microsoft, Google and Dancebyte are scrambling to secure supplies from memory chip makers such as Micron, Samsung Electronics and SK Hynix. And look at your financial indicators. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 446. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling at 39, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 94. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 34. Russia, it's 77 rubles 52. India, it's 89 rupees 85, while in China, it's 70 yuan 7, and in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 10 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,220 and platinum at $1,637 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.45 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matabala Mahabe.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
The Ghanaian ambassador to South Africa, Benjamin Kwashi, has praised a high-level regional seminar in Pretoria aimed at strengthening the protection of civilians in conflict zones across Africa. Speaking to Channel Africa on Monday at the three-day International Humanitarian Law Forum, co-hosted by South Africa's Department of International Relations and Cooperation, or DIRCO, and the International Committee of the Red Cross, or ICRC, in Pretoria, Ambassador Kwashi warned that with more than 50 active conflicts on the continent, urgent action is needed to prevent atrocities and ensure full compliance with humanitarian law. Let's hear more from Channel Africa's reporter Michael Mbewe, our time now being 7:45 Central African.
The seminar brings together diplomats, legal experts and humanitarian actors to push for stronger political will under the global high-level initiative to curb the widespread war violations affecting civilians in the continent. In the Democratic Republic of Congo and Sudan, civilians endure severe humanitarian crises ranging from sexual violence, killings, family separations, and unaccompanied minors who suffer the most. These conditions require African states to join the initiative, strengthen their legal protections, and effectively implement international humanitarian law. Ghanaian ambassador to South Africa, Benjamin Kwashi, elaborated the importance of the initiative.
I think it's so significant knowing very well that we have almost 50 plus active wars going on in Africa. It's a very gloomy picture of the world we are going to leave for the next generation. And I think the least we can do is to ensure that this IHL comes into full force. Because we've had instances of humanitarian aid workers, people being raped, people being denigrated, people going through all sort of, unhuman treatment during wars and conflict. I believe that what most of the speakers, especially the co-chairs, have indicated is that they just don't want us to look at just the humanitarian aspect. They want us to look at how we can prevent even the conflict in the first place.
He says the conflict in the Sahel region has caused a humanitarian crisis in Ghana, posing security threats. But Ghana's leadership is managing the situation.
We do on the other side of the borders that we share with Nigeria, Burkina Faso, Mali, and all the others in the region. I think you should also be aware that President Mahama for the first time has constituted a body that is responsible for advising him on what is happening within the Sahel regions. It's a very, very renowned military man who is in charge of that. And the aim of the president, and he has clearly stated it without any ambiguity, that look, the rippling effect of what happens there, the refugees coming in, some of even the assailant coming into Ghana, some of even the rebels coming into Ghana. And these constitute a lot of grave challenges for our country. So in ensuring that he showed leadership, that is why he formed that special envoy to the Sahel region. I can assure you that the rippling effects are there, but Ghana as a country is managing it and ensuring that we don't close our borders to the refugees. This is a matter of humanitarian concern, and I believe that it is something that Ghana doesn't take for granted.
And from the DRC delegation, Special Advisor to DRC Mission to South Africa, Laurent Lyongo, condemned armed groups and actors who violate safe spaces meant to protect civilians, warning that attacks on places of refuge amount to war crimes driven by greed and external interests.
So when you see in the DRC, as people have been displaced and they can find as a shelter, a place of worship, a school, a scientific place or something related, but you see the atrocity of people because of their own personal interest. They are just careless. And then this is causing humanitarian crime or war crime. So people have to know that, they're embarking into wars because of one or two big companies of the world, you see, and then some governments who are so greedy for their own interests, but in the meantime, not caring. It looks like some states are really doing it on purpose and with an intention of displacing the natural landscape or the natural fabric of the society.
We asked Lyongo what measures is the DRC government implementing to improve the humanitarian situation, and this was his response.
Yes, as you could see that last month, the president of the Fellow Tshisekedi, as a head of state, a father of a nation, has attended with other leaders in France some joint sitting regarding how to open a humanitarian corridor to assist those victims in war. It's just to show the spirit of the states, preventing the population, and which didn't find an echo back from the other side.
Meanwhile, the ICRC says decades of escalating conflicts have uprooted more than 45 million people across Africa, with its regional head, Jean-Nicolas Paquet-Rouleau, warning that each new wave of violence grows more devastating.
I mean, we have been working on the African continent since the Abyssinian War of the 1930s. And it seems that every year, every decade, wars become worse. More people are affected by it. They cost more money. They are causing disruption to the environment. They are increasing migration. And they are consisting of millions of people who are uprooted from their lives. We're talking about over 45 million people that have had to flee conflict in Africa alone.
Michael Mbewe, Channel Africa News, Johannesburg.
Coming up, we take a look at a strong condemnation of U.S. President Donald Trump's sentiments and recent remarks on South Africa and the G20. We'll be speaking to a labor movement that is Zimbabwean-based. It's called African Democrats or Lead.
9 to 12 midday, Central African Time. On the move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and And when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrels. There's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move. From Cape to Cairo, Dakar to Dar es Salaam. Rise and shine with Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda on Channel Africa.
Zimbabwe's Labour economist and African Democrats, or lead Labour movement head, have issued a strong condemnation of US President Donald Trump's recent remarks on South Africa and the G20, describing them as racist, false, and rooted in neo-colonial thinking. The party says the comments undermine African sovereignty and revive harmful narratives about the continent. Lead President Linda Chingurarai Masarira joins us now to outline the party's position. Linda, thank you for joining us. Good morning.
Good morning. How are you?
Good, thanks. How are you?
We're enjoying the rains in Zimbabwe.
It seems to be raining everywhere or in a lot of places currently. But let's start here, Linda. Why did Lead feel it was important to formally respond to Donald Trump's comments on South Africa and the G20?
Labour Economists and African Democrats is a party that is Afrocentric and rooted in our Africanness. And we have been on record refusing subjugation by the Americans and any European country because we're still suffering from a colonial hangover. And it is time that this generation, our generation, starts shaking off neo-colonial mentalities, the colonial hangover, and start embracing our Africanness, who we are as African people, and take control of our sovereignty. For a very long time, we've been dictated to on what to do with our economies, what to do with our countries, with our resources, and everything else. That is why most of the times Africa seems to be lagging behind, because we're not taking charge of our minerals, our destiny, and our economies.
What is particularly damaging about these sentiments or remarks by the US's Donald Trump describing, or Lead rather having described them as racist and neo-colonial?
What is really damaging is that it presents a picture as if African people are barbaric. And it also kills the African spirit of unity. And we cannot continue keeping quiet as the US tries to play big brother on all African countries whenever they feel like their ego has been stroked. We went through a phase like that as Zimbabwe when we were sanctioned because we were not aligning with what the US want, and Zimbabwe was called a threat to US foreign policy. So for example, Labour Economists and African Democrats doesn't want the same to happen to South Africa or any other African country because we suffered a lot economically. The people of Zimbabwe suffered because of the US sanctions. And what we see here is very soon the US is going to gravitate and want to put a lot of sanctions and blockades on South Africa, which is not necessary because South Africa is a sovereign state. They've got a right to have their own foreign policy. They've got a right to have their own decisions on how they have relations with the US and how they stop their interference in other countries' wars, and how they actually initiate wars in different countries across the world.
What does Lead want the international community to understand about Donald Trump's claim of this white genocide happening in South Africa? Or is that not even a concern for you in terms of how the
it is actually a concern because the white genocide is a myth
themselves?
No, beyond that, we are actually concerned about Donald Trump's statements because from our perspective, the white genocide is a myth. We have seen a lot of Africans being killed by Boer farmers in South Africa. We have not had Donald Trump condemning that. And if this myth continues to be spoken about over and over again, it actually justifies interference in African land reform. We understand that South Africa has also been discussing about land reform. He has been discussing about their own sovereignty. And all this that is now happening from Donald Trump is trying to stop the land reform program that might happen in South Africa. And we've seen this before. White people do not want black people to own the means of production. They do not want them to own their land, but this land belongs to Africans. At the end of the day, people should wake up and smell the coffee. The condemnation that is coming from President Donald Trump is all about the land issue that has been spoken about for the past 2 years in South Africa. Is trying to stop the takeover of land by black South Africans in their own country, native South Africans. And if South Africans do not wake up and smell the coffee, they'll continue playing second fiddle in their own country without owning the means of production and without owning their land.
We often refer to these issues or sentiments from the US as resulting in US-SA tensions. Do you see a tension here if it seems to be one side that has a problem and the other, South Africa, doesn't really?
It is actually a tension that is already existing, because when we find a superpower trying to fight a smaller country, the tension already exists. What is important is for Africa to stand with South Africa, because we cannot allow the Americans to keep on playing big brother to all African states.
And
the
you
US is
also
in
touched
no
on
position to lecture
the...
Africa on humanity, justice, or morality.
Sorry to interrupt you there. Continue.
Okay, I was saying it is actually hypocritical for President Donald Trump to accuse Africa and South Africa of human rights abuses, while the United States stands guilty of a lot of human rights abuses. So from our perspective, we're saying the US is in no position whatsoever to lecture Africa on humanity, justice, or morality.
That's actually the point I was getting to, the hypocritical parts that you touch on as lead on his sentiments. Just your closing remarks then, Linda, in terms of the message that lead is sending to African governments on these kinds of issues.
I think it is important for African governments to stop running to the east and west with begging bowls, and to unite for a cause, which is liberation. Because as long as we're begging for their money, they'll always want to dictate what we do and what we do not do. So at the end of the day, the foreign aid that they usually bring forth to African countries is actually a tool of manipulation, dependence, and geopolitical control. It is time for African states to start have their own monetary fund, that they assist each other in building and developing Africa. Because as long as we're not doing that, they'll continue wanting to manipulate how we run our countries, how we run our economies, and Pan-Africanism will become a farce. At the end of the day, Africa belongs to Africans. African sovereignty is not negotiable. African dignity is not up for debate. We should instead demand reparations from the colonial masters, from the Europeans who have taken so much from Africa to build their own states. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Linda. We'll leave it there for today. We appreciate your time.
You're welcome.
Linda Chungirarai Masirarira, joining us there as lead president. That is a labor movement based in Zimbabwe. Also, she's Zimbabwe's labor economist and part of the African Democrats. 8 o'clock Central African time. This is Rise and Shine. We are Channel Africa. I am Asanda Beda. Let's hand you over to Onele Nsinsi with our news, and then Musibudi Makura follows with sports headlines.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The Electoral Commission in Guinea-Bissau has said it cannot finalize the presidential election results. This after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes in the wake of a military takeover, the ousting of President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, and rising tension in the country. A political scientist specializing in African politics at the American Graduate School in Paris, Professor Douglas Yates, explains.
We're watching a crime being committed with our eyes wide open. So let me just explain that this coup, by all indications, is not a legitimate coup. That is, in Gabon, you had a coup. The military took the president, held him under arrest for over a year, and took power. What we have here is an autogolpe, a self-coup. Let me explain. The current president has already staged 2 fake coups. He staged them so that he could dissolve the parliament. And the reason was he doesn't have a majority in the parliament.
President Bola Tinubu has nominated Nigeria's former top general to replace the defense minister. Christopher Musa resigned amid a surge in mass kidnappings and Islamist attacks in the north that has led the president to declare security emergency. Musa served as Nigeria's chief of defense staff from 2023 until October this year. He will succeed Muhammad Badaru Abubakar, a former regional governor who stepped down as defense minister on Monday, citing health reasons. The National Assembly in South Africa has adopted a report on the Rules Committee that establishes a committee that will play oversight over the presidency. The report was adopted with the objection of one opposition party. The African National Congress Party Deputy Chief Whip, Doris Mpapane, says the argument to establish the committee first arose in the 6th Parliament and later found expression in the report of the State Capture Commission. There are also changes to the procedure of oral replies, and the time allocated for ministers to answer questions in the House have been increased. These changes will kick off next year. Mpapane says these reforms set South Africa's parliament apart from other parliaments.
The proposed committee is expected to focus on the budget and administration of the presidency and to call a member of the executive delegated by the president to account therefor. In this way, it will function in a similar way to a portfolio committee. But the rules also permit the committee to call on the president and deputy president once every year to discuss policy matters of national and international importance.
South Africa's exclusion from this month's 20 Sherpa meeting in the United States means that it will be unable to shape or influence important agendas or advance decisions reached at the recent summit held in Johannesburg. That is the view of Director of the African Center for the Study of the United States at the University of Pretoria, Professor Christopher Isike, who spoke to the SABC News. International Relations spokesperson Crispin Piri has reiterated that as a founding member, South Africa's commitment to the G20's principles and collaborative framework remains steadfast. He said all members recognize that the strength and legitimacy of the forum derive from its established composition and shared adherence to its founding protocols. The two countries are at odds over a range of domestic and foreign policies. The standoff came to a head when U.S. President Donald Trump skipped last month's G20 summit hosted in Johannesburg. South Africa handed over the G20 presidency to the U.S. only after the summit. Lastly, authorities in Indonesia are rushing to get aid to communities in Sumatra that remain cut off for more than a week after heavy rains began lashing the island. The number of victims stand at more than 750. Hundreds of thousands more are in need of food, water and other essential goods. The BBC's Ajeng Rastri report.
More than a week after Cyclone Senyar hit Sumatra, some areas remain isolated, including parts of Tapanuli Tengah and Aceh, where roads and bridges are destroyed. Aid is being airdropped, and in Aceh, teams are traveling by boat through swollen rivers to reach stranded villages. But the key question is no longer whether there's enough aid to be distributed, but how fast it can reach the most cut-off communities.
Channel Africa News, I'm Onele Tsinzi.
SABC News. The African Perspective.
And coming up in your sports news this hour, FIFA set to use VAR for corners at the World Cup next year, while South Africa's Proteas team is building depth to the 2027 World Cup. Details coming up at 8:30.
From Africa's broadcast capital to the furthest corners of the globe, this is Rise and Shine, every weekday mornings on Channel Africa.
Thanks, Musibudi there and Onele. And we enter now the third and final hour of Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa. In this hour, we take a look at the anticipated testimony of South Africa's suspended police minister, Senzo Mchunu. This took place at the Madlanga Commission. We look back to those events of yesterday, Tuesday. And of course, after looking at that story, we'll be looking at analysis and in terms of the developments there from the ad hoc committee to the Madlanga Commission and the parallels that we'll be unpacking on that story. And then there'll be more coming up after the economics and sports news later. My name is Asanda, Beda.
Siyabangena manje. Vito iJabulani Kolele iMagoda. Jabulani is a young man from Giyani in Limpopo in South Africa. A very easy guy, taking things easy. To know me is to know that I love what I do, which I'm crazy about it. So when you hear me on radio, expect the best. Expect great music. Expect great content. Expect 180 minutes of nothing but fun. You'll find me on the morning reset, 3 to 6 a.m., Monday to Friday. Siyabangena baba. Ay. Mbuleke. África. Conhece o Ntivani? Claro que sou eu. Ntivani é o amante da música de corpo e alma. Eu amo música africana. Ele aprecia todos os tipos de melodias e passa os seus dias a ouvir a Channel Africa. Okay. Adivinha só, a Channel Africa quer ajudar o Ntivani e os amantes da música em todo o lado a descobrir ainda mais música incrível. Por isso, a Channel Africa está a convocar artistas africanos a submeterem as suas músicas. Músicos, lembrem-se de nos dar todas as informações relevantes no music@channelafrica.co.za. As submissões são a vossa oportunidade de ser ouvidos, mas não garantem inclusão na lista. Todas as submissões serão cuidadosamente analisadas para verificar se cumprem os requisitos da nossa estação. Canal África, a perspectiva africana.
Wake up, Africa. Peter Ndoro and Asanda Beda are here to help you rise and shine. Weekdays, 6 till 9 a.m. Central African Time. Only on Channel Africa.
The much anticipated testimony of South Africa's suspended police minister, Senzo Mchunu, took place at the Madlanga Commission on Tuesday. Mchunu has been placed at the center of corruption allegations made by KwaZulu-Natal Province Police Commissioner General Nhlanhla Mkhwanazi. Mkhwanazi has accused Mchunu of unlawfully disbanding the political killings task team. He further claimed that Mchunu has links to alleged criminal cartel syndicates like attempted murder accused Vusumuzi Kat Matlala. Sibahle Mota has more.
Giving his opening address at the Madlanga Commission, Police Minister Senzo Mchunu testified that he has never been accused of corruption since taking public office. Mchunu has occupied the Departments of Water and Sanitation, as well as Public Service and Administration as minister. He also served as the Premier of KwaZulu-Natal between 2013 and 2016.
Through all those positions, public positions, that I have had the privilege to occupy, from MEC, Premier, ministerial positions, I have never been accused of corruption, not once. This is the first time that I get accused of such, as alleged particularly on the 6th of July.
Mchunu has been accused of unlawfully disbanding the PKTT. The PKTT is at the center of allegations made at the Madlanga Commission by General Mkhwanazi. Mchunu defended his actions, stating that the PKTT was not a permanent unit in the South African Policing Service.
What I'm explaining here is that the National Political Killings Task Team was a project. It had a project leader. It was not a unit in SAPS, and it had no budget allocated, but budget had to be found from other programs, even during extensions to fund it. And it had a clear objective, and it had to be subjected to regular assessments, and costs had to be calculated.
Disbandment of the PKTT will be at the center of Mchunu's testimony. Evidence leader Advocate Mahlabe Sello confirmed that Mchunu will give his testimony uninterrupted on his first day. He will then be subjected to cross-examination by evidence leaders on Thursday. Then on Friday afternoon, his legal counsel, Advocate Tembeka Tobi, will re-examine him. Advocate Sello elaborates.
And we have engaged with Minister Mchunu and his legal representatives, and the agreement is as follows. Minister Mchunu will start this afternoon, and in the course of the afternoon, he will give evidence, his version of the issues, uninterrupted and unquestioned in large part by the evidence leaders. He will be testifying in this session of the Commission strictly on matters pertaining to the PKTT.
Mchunu returns to the stand on Thursday. I am Sibahle Mota in Pretoria.
So staying then with that story, let's unpack this. And we're joined by Professor Sipho Siepe for that. Professor Siepe, good morning to you. How are you this particular Wednesday?
Good morning.
Yes, we get another update and analysis from you today. Let's look at this one. How do you interpret Mchunu's stance at the Madlanga Commission versus as when he was appearing between the ad hoc committee of Parliament? He repeated many of the reasons he had already given to Parliament's ad hoc committee looking into the same issue. Did you expect that something different could have come up?
Definitely not. I expected him to hold the same line. One must also remember that if he were to start saying something else, he could easily expose himself to a possibility where he may be accused of having perjured himself. And perjury is taken very seriously by Parliament. So he understood that aspect. But it is also a reflection of his own conviction that in disestablishing and disbanding the political killings task team, he holds the view that he was actually correct. And what he tried to do yesterday, as he did during his appearance before the ad hoc committee of Parliament, was to point out that the decisions were already taken about the possibility of disestablishment of this particular task team. And that he could actually show that there was already a work study that suggested that there's a need to find a way of rationalizing the entire process and making sure that the decisions are streamlined under particular business units. His argument was that task team, by their very nature, are short-term. But given the persistence of these killings, and that not only the political killings, but there are other murders, it will be important to create a unit that will fit into the structure of the police. And this is the argument that he wanted to put across. And to simply say, had the outcomes of the study been implemented, the task team or the political killings task team would have fallen by the wayside. It would have been subsumed within the new structure. So he again tries to make a point that his decision was not driven by the intention to try to protect certain individuals, especially individuals who are part of the crime syndicate or the drug cartels.
Was he correct then in his defense, as you mentioned, that this task team was not meant to be a permanent structure? But does that necessarily mean that it would be obviously discontinued? Would there have not been any contingencies or flexibilities to allow for a continuation should more and unexpected cans of worms be opened?
Yeah, well, his presentation still leaves a certain question, a number of questions unanswered. For instance, the argument had been presented that yes, all task teams have a short lifespan and they are temporary. But what he could not put across is to answer the question, why did you choose this particular one when there are many other task teams? And secondly, the haste of immediacy was also problematic, including the timing of it, but also that the timing of it seemed to coincide with what appeared to be a desperation on the side of the likes of Matala, who felt that they were under pressure and whose views were saying this political killing staff team is becoming more of a hurdle or impediment in terms of their own process. So they are still, despite him holding that particular view, he still will need to explain this a series of questions. Why this particular task team, and why the timing, and also why is there a coincidence in the disbandment with regard to this team, and especially when it seems to coincide with the expressed ambition of people like Ket Matala. So there'll be a number of questions. And of course, somewhere there were other considerations that he intimated about issues of cost, which of course many other witnesses have actually challenged Mkhunu on that this task team was very effective, but what he does not answer is why, even if you are correct, why have you chosen not to consult the people who should have been consulted on the ground? The very same people who were at the operational level, like Mkwanasi. How could you ignore that? And even the whole notion of how suddenly the new notion of immediacy or immediate end up having a new meaning. Because when you deal with police matters and where the investigation, the notion of immediacy does not work. What he could have used is to agree that these guys must bring an end, or must be seen to saying this stuff thing, his term is coming to an end, but there'll be a continuation. Not a suggestion that says we must stop this investigation.
A 2019 recommendation that Mkhunu touched on there to integrate the National Political Killings Task Team into the Murder and Robbery Unit of the South African Police Services. Do you think that this would have led to an overlap in operations, therefore making it make sense why the then Police Commissioner Khetla Sithole would sanction it?
No. I mean, what he cannot explain, I mean, whatever explanation he gives in terms of the issue of integration, it doesn't take away the speed with which he made the decision and the fact that he has chosen not to consult the right people. And also, those right people would have given him reports which would have guided the decision. So far, it is very unclear beyond the work study that he had benefited from the many reports that were given. The very same report that made the interministerial committee to always say we continue to support the continuation of this political killing staff team. So he still needs to answer those questions. You can't ignore the very people that you should be working with and then say, I have decided as a minister in a particular corner. Remember also, you're talking about the minister who did not even consult his own deputies. And every member of who are in operations, every general who came to testify have indicated that the Minister Mkhunu could have done this differently. That part he has not responded to.
Professor Siepe, we're going to leave it for today. Thank you so much. Always great catching up with you.
You're welcome.
Professor Sipho Siepe, political analyst, they're giving us the latest from the Madlanga Commission.
Gender-based violence is destroying lives and tearing communities apart. It happens in homes, in schools, at workplaces, and too often in silence. But it doesn't have to continue. If you see it, speak out. If you are hurting, reach out. because doing nothing is not an option. Listen to all 19 SABC radio stations from Wednesday 23rd of July for hard talk, discussions, advice, dramas, educational shows, and interviews around GBV with experts, survivors, lawmakers, and the whole country affected by gender-based violence. For all your favorite SABC radio stations, call 0800 428 428 to report abuse or get help. GBV, it ends with you. This message is brought to you by the SABC. Good morning starts here. Rise and shine on Channel Africa, the African perspective.
A new report by the National Planning Commission, or NPC, in South Africa shows that there is a significant buildup of capital in the economy that is not being reinvested in gross fixed capital formation, or GFCF, which needs to be circulated through transactions to drive growth and development. This is contained in the report titled Transformation of South Africa's Monetary Architecture 1983 to 2024. The NPC says a sweeping redesign of the country's monetary architecture could release as much as 5 trillion rands, that's roughly $293 billion US dollars, for new investment in infrastructure and the energy transition. For more on this, we're joined on the line now by Commissioner Mark Swilling. Mark, good morning. Thank you for joining us.
Good morning.
Please tell us more about this 284-page report. It looks at as far as back as 1983 until last year, and also what inspired it.
The inspiration comes from work done by the National Planning Commission to assess the investment requirements to achieve the infrastructure goals that are specified in the National Infrastructure Plan 2050 that was approved by Cabinet. So that's our first really significant long-term infrastructure planning framework. And so the National Planning Commission went about the task of saying, okay, let's accept those goals, but what is it going to cost us through to 2050 to achieve energy security and net zero, to achieve water security, to achieve digital migration into the 21st century? And obviously, we came up with a significant gap between what is invested now and what is needed. And so the next question was, well, where's the money going to come from? And given that fiscal and monetary policies are unlikely to change, we have to box clever and come up with new ways of mobilizing capital to invest in infrastructure. And the surprising conclusion is that there is very substantial capital in the South African economy that could get redirected.
Some of the findings of the report show that wealth inequality has worsened, while investments in gross fixed capital formation have declined in recent years. What is the reason behind this?
Well, the National Planning Commission, in the National Development Plan, set a target, and that target was investment in gross fixed capital formation should rise to 30% of GDP. We've never achieved that goal. We've only got to about 20%, and that was in 2008-9. And since then, there's been a decline, and now we're below 15%. There's no example of a successful industrialized economy that has got a declining levels of investment in gross fixed capital formation. And this has got a lot to do with state capture. So you asked, what's the reason? It's got a lot to do with state capture, but also the impact of the global financial crisis, which we didn't respond to very well because state capture began soon after. And the decline of the state-owned enterprises as key investors in our infrastructure. But the breakdown of trust between the financial sector and government has resulted in a reluctance by the private sector to continue to invest in, for example, municipal water structure or even energy infrastructure that is owned by Eskom. They're more than happy to invest in privately owned energy generation. So those are the reasons. As far as inequality is concerned, well, we come out a very different, a very difficult context, which is the apartheid context, which enriched white people and allowed for concentration of property ownership, asset ownership in the hands of a small minority. Over time, there has been a growing middle class which has deracialized, but the elite, who still control the large bulk of the wealth, remains largely white. And so we have a financial system which tends to favor people who save money in pension funds, who buy government bonds, who buy equities in private companies, and valuable property, and that tends to be concentrated in the hands of a very rich elite. And so we have a financial system which enables upward flow of wealth rather than downward flow into the hands of the majority, despite an increase in welfare policies to transfer wealth to the poor. About 60% of our national budget goes actually to poor people.
So why has this been left unchecked?
It's been left unchecked, I think, and I'm speaking very much as an academic, but I am a commissioner on the National Planning Commission. But as an academic, I think it's at the very root is that we actually have a very poor understanding of the financial system and how it works. It tends to we've tended to think of finance as either monetary or fiscal policy. In other words, the monetary policy controlled by the South African Reserve Bank, or fiscal policy controlled by the Minister of Finance and the National Treasury. And we understand all the other financial institutions as merely operators within the market. But actually, the financial system is an integrated, complex, adaptive system. And financial flows flow through that financial system in accordance with very structured relationships between a set of balance sheets of all our financial institutions. And I don't think this understanding is widely held. And so it's a weird thing. We wake up every day and go to work in order to earn money, and we depend entirely on money to survive and hopefully get a little bit wealthier. But we don't actually understand the financial system that we depend on. And that's really the root cause of why I think we haven't really got a good grip on what is it going to take to increase investments in gross fixed capital formation. And we have a very poor understanding of what it means to redistribute wealth in a way that begins to undermine the highly, highly unequal distribution of assets in our society. So we need to, for example, about 43% of all households is headed up by women in South Africa, and the poorer the households, the larger that percentage becomes. And so the question is, do we have the kinds of policies that relate to woman-headed households that may in fact be getting poorer because their liabilities are increasing faster than their assets? What kind of interventions will change that? An obvious one is to make sure that smaller businesses, many of whom are led by women, actually get access to credit. And that's not happening on a significant scale.
Professor, we'll leave it there for now. One of the recommendations, I guess, that is, and I'm sure there's more to talk on this topic. So we'll catch up another time. Professor, thank you for joining us.
Thank you.
Professor Mark Swilling is a commissioner as well as Professor of Sustainable Development in the Center for Sustainability Transitions, or a CST, that's in the Faculty of Economic and Management Sciences at the University of Stellenbosch. 8:30 Central African Time. Good morning, Onele. She has our news headlines.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. The Electoral Commission in Guinea-Bissau has said it cannot finalize the presidential election results after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes in the wake of a military takeover, the ousting of the president, and rising tension in the country. South Africa's exclusion from this month's 20 Sherpa meeting in the United States means that it will be unable to shape or influence important agendas or advance decisions reached at the recent summit held in Johannesburg. The two countries are at odds over a range of domestic and foreign policies. And authorities in Indonesia are rushing to get aid to communities in Sumatra that remain cut off more than a week after heavy rains began lashing the island. Channel Africa News, I am Onele Nsinsi.
SABC News. Headlines. The African Perspective.
And now it's time for sports. We say good morning to Musibudi Makura for an update.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you so much, Asanda. Very good morning once again for the Sports Desk for the final time this morning on Africa Rise and Shine. We'll start your sports bulletin with football news. So Liverpool manager Arne Slot has confirmed Mohamed Salah will link up with Egypt before the 15th of December after being named in the Pharaohs' final squad for the upcoming Africa Cup of Nations tournament. Slot also revealed Salah will feature in Liverpool's Premier League clash against Crystal Palace on the 13th of December before joining the national team. Egypt will begin open training camp on the 3rd of December. That's, of course, today, moving into a closed camp 4 days later. They will play a friendly match against Nigeria on the 14th of December before departing for Morocco. Well, FIFA is said to press ahead with plans to introduce VAR checks on corner kicks at the 2026 FIFA World Cup. This despite domestic leagues rejecting the idea for wider use. So at October's IFAB meeting, football lawmakers agreed VAR could be expanded to cover incorrect yellow card decisions, but rejected FIFA's proposal to review corners. Now that means the World Football Governing Body will effectively create a trial for the tournament in the USA, Mexico as well as Canada next year. FIFA has often tested innovations at its competitions, including semi-automated offside technology and referees announcing VAR decisions to the crowd, and could use the same mechanism to begin reviewing corners. We'll stay with football news. Erling Haaland has written his name into Premier League history, becoming the fastest player to reach 100 goals. The Manchester City striker struck in the first half of Tuesday's thrilling 5-4 win over Fulham at Craven Cottage, taking his tally to a century in just 111 league appearances. Haaland shattered the previous record held by Alan Shearer, who needed 124 matches to reach the milestone during his time at Newcastle and Blackburn Rovers. Meanwhile, in another match played on Tuesday, Everton snatched a narrow 1-0 win over Bournemouth at the Vitality Stadium, ending the hosts' unbeaten run. The defeat extends Bournemouth's winless run in the Premier League to 5 matches now, just days after they squandered a 2-goal advantage to lose 3-2 to Sunderland. On to some cricket news now. South Africa's Proteas captain Themba Bavuma says they have already begun the preparations for the 2027 ICC Cricket World Cup on home soil and play every game with that in mind. He was speaking ahead of the second one-day international match against India today in Nurapur, trailing 1-0 in the 3-match ODI series. This after losing by 17 runs in Ranchi over the weekend. Bavuma says every single match they play is about giving the newer players in the team opportunities to make sure they have enough depth by the time the tournament comes through in 2027.
Every game we play now is a big lead-up opportunity to that. I think it's about filling in the gaps per se with guys who have left. So I mean, guys like Brevis who've come in, we know what he's about. Matthew Breeskill, who's fitted in like a glove within our batting unit. Quinton de Kock now as well coming in to see the role that he can fulfill. So, it's about giving those guys opportunities and creating depth, right? Especially from a resource point of view.
Meanwhile, one of those who looked sure to bet to play on a big role in their preparation, should I say, to the World Cup is Marco Jansen, who has found a bit of purple patch at the moment, having been key in their 2-0 series win. He did carry that form into the white ball cricket with a well-played 70 on Sunday, while taking 2 wickets as well.
Yeah, I think from an all-rounder point of view, I mean, I don't know where the rankings sit, but I'm sure Marco Jansen in any one of those formats will definitely be the top 10. And I think his contributions, with bat, with the ball, sometimes even both, they've been immense to our success. And I think, Marco, he's still a young guy, but he's had a lot of international cricket that is under his belt.
Right, for any sports stories you'd like to share with us, our email address is newsroom@channelafrica.co.za, or send us a call on +27 11714 4459. I'm back with more sports news with the On The Move team in the next hour. For Channel Africa Sport, I am Musibudi Makura.
Sports on Channel Africa. The African Perspective. 9 to 12 midday Central African Time. On the Move with Palisa Tau and Benjamin Mushatama.
Now, when you go to the hospital, there's medical attention that you need, and that's the only experience you're expecting to have. If you are a transgender person, sometimes those experiences can be marred by the demand of trying to understand your gender, your sexuality, and not particularly getting the assistance that you need.
One time, I was sexually abused by someone who used to live next door to my house. So when I went to the police to report, I was in a weave, I was wearing a dress, and when I got there, the police person that helped me said to me, obviously we're gonna rape you because why do you walk around looking like trying to be a woman when you are a man? And after that, the person just walked scot-free.
How do you deal with that? Because there's a double barrel abuse there. So it's not even double barrels, there's kind of multi-dimensional forms of abuse.
I think one thing that I will tell you about trans people is we are strong, not because we want to be strong, but because we don't have an option. It is what it is. Because the struggles that we face each and every day are like unimaginable.
Keeping you on the know and on the move.
All right, who's keeping us in the know now? It's Matapelo Mahape, and she'll bring us what we need to know in terms of the world of business. Good morning.
Business news on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thank you, Asanda, and good morning. Starting off with the story, President Cyril Ramaphosa says Mozambique is South Africa's largest trading partner on the African continent and the fourth in the world. Ramaphosa addressed a gala dinner in Maputo last night, adding the two nations are committed to growing this partnership in a mutually beneficial manner. President Ramaphosa is in Mozambique for the Binational Commission. He says many South African companies have invested in Mozambique.
After our session of the Binational Commission, we will attend the launch of yet another flagship project in energy, the Integrated Hydrocarbons Infrastructure Facility, a partnership between the government of Mozambique and one of our leading companies, Sasol.
And the British government has announced that it will withdraw its $1.15 billion support for the Total Energies-led Mozambique liquefied natural gas project, with the Netherlands following suit, bringing the total withdrawal $2.2 billion. The funding had been promised in 2020 through UK Export Finance, just before the UK committed to ending direct government backing for overseas fossil fuel projects. The African Energy Chamber has since condemned the UK's withdrawal of the funding from Mozambique LNG, citing that the Western climate agendas undermine Africa's urgent need for energy security and economic growth. Executive Chairman of the African Energy Chamber, NJ Ayu.
It's a really bad decision, economically, financially,
and also bad for global energy security, bad for Mozambique. Everybody, all the global leaders showed up to South Africa, and it was basically an African G20 with a strong commitment to African industrialization, African prosperity, African development. And 1 week right after that, what's the first thing the UK does and the Netherlands? They pulled back financing out of this country, which could go from zero to the third largest producer of natural gas in the world. It sends the wrong message, and that comes with a big question that.
And South Africa's Department of Mineral and Petroleum Resources has announced that the fuel prices will increase from today. Both grades of petrol will increase by 29 South African cents per litre. Both grades of diesel will go up by between 65 South African cents and 85 South African cents per litre. Meanwhile, eliminating paraffin will be nearly 1 South African rand more expensive, while liquefied petroleum gas will increase by 24 South African cents. The department's spokesperson, Robert Maki.
The reason for these adjustments are the average Brent crude oil prices decreased slightly during the period under review, and the rand appreciated against the dollar during the same period. The international product prices of petrol and diesel were also affected by lower inventories ahead of the winter season in the northern hemisphere, as well as the planned and unplanned refinery shutdowns in Europe as they prepare for their winter season.
And Malawi has embraced the use of drones along its border with Mozambique, Zambia and Tanzania to combat smuggling, which has negatively affected national revenue collection. This initiative follows a report from the Malawi Revenue Authority, MRA, to the government indicating that efforts to maximize revenue collection are being hampered by widespread smuggling. The initiative, dubbed Drone Border Surveillance, is part of the Southern Africa Trade Connectivity Project funded by the World Bank. Brian Kampaji.
Every small effort to curb or control smuggling of goods into Malawi, illegal exports, is a welcome development. This is an effective deterrent measure, force compliance, and increase the tax revenue for both import and export duty and taxes. The program should, however, be monitored and evaluated to ensure that whatever is spent is not more than what is collected.
And Serbia's President Aleksandar Vučić says that the country's only oil refinery is set to close. He said that the United States had not responded to a request to temporarily lift sanctions on the NIS plant, which is mostly owned by Russia. The BBC's Guy Delaney reports.
President Aleksandar Vučić said the US was only concerned with its geopolitical interests, while the Russian majority owners of NIS didn't want to sell. Serbia and its people are stuck in the middle, with fuel supplies only until the middle of January. NIS provides more than 80% of Serbia's petrol and diesel, as well as almost all its jet and heavy fuels. From October, US sanctions stopped crude deliveries to its refinery. Serbia had asked for a temporary reprieve until new ownership could be arranged, but Washington seems unwilling to budge.
And a look at your financial indicators. $1 US in Nigeria is trading at 1,000 naira 446. In Botswana, it's 13 pula 23. Kenya, the dollar is trading at 128 shilling 39, and in Zambia, it's 22 kwacha 94. The BRICS countries, $1 in Brazil is trading at 5 real 34. Russia, it's 77 rubles 52. India, it's 89 rupees 85, and in China, it's 70 rand 7. While in South Africa, $1 is trading at 17 rands 10 cents. $1 is trading at 75 pence to the British pound and 86 to the euro. A look at your commodities. Gold is trading at $4,220 and platinum at $1,637 per ounce, while the price of Brent crude oil is at $62.45 a barrel. For any business stories you'd like to share with us, please send an email to newsroom@channelafrica.co.za or call us on +2711 714 4459. For Channel Africa Business News, I am Matapala Mahape.
Business News on Channel Africa. The African Perspective.
Thanks, Matapelo. Let's take a look at this story now, also related to the world of economics. As global leaders push for sweeping World Trade Organization or WTO reforms, senior international trade consultant Collins Nweke warns that the debate is overlooking a crucial force, the diaspora. He says multilateralism cannot be rebuilt with outdated systems, while the technical expertise and economic influence of diaspora professionals remains sidelines. He was speaking to our economics reporter, Innocent Simosa.
The WTO's reform agenda often focuses on legal and institutional issues. Meanwhile, senior international trade consultant Collins Nweke argues that the real gap is human capital. But how can African countries practically mobilize their diaspora trade experts to fill this capacity deficit, especially in areas like dispute settlement and complex trade negotiations?
The central thesis of my book on economic diplomacy of the diaspora is pretty simple. Africa is not short of talent. It is short of systems that recognize and deploy that talent. As the World Trade Organization embarks on its most ambitious reform in 30 years, African countries cannot afford to remain spectators. Our diaspora holds some of the finest trade lawyers, negotiators, and economists anywhere in the world. If we integrate them strategically, we bridge our capacity gap instantly and reposition Africa as a rules shaper and not rules takers.
Nweke highlights that global trade governance remains state-centric while the world has become network-driven. He also recommended some structural changes for the WTO to formally integrate diaspora professionals into the reform processes rather than treating them as a peripheral actors.
Innocent, the World Trade Organization still thinks in 20th century's silos. Member states on one side, observers on the other, while global trade now moves through networks and knowledge ecosystems. That's the reality of today. To integrate diaspora expertise, 3 structural shifts are critically essential. 1, create a WTO knowledge affiliate system, allowing accredited diaspora experts to directly support committees, especially on new issues like digital trade and supply chain security. 2, mobilize stakeholder advisory panels where diaspora professional bodies can feed into reform debates, not as lobbyists, but as technical partners.
With the G20 now aligning behind the need for deep WTO reform, the question is, what risks do African nations face if they fail to leverage the strategic economic diplomacy potential of their diaspora?
Right. The G20's alignment behind the deep WTO reform is a double-edged sword. It creates opportunity, but also the risk that Africa becomes a rule taker again if it shows up unprepared. Without diaspora expertise, African countries risk being absent from the drafting rooms, losing out on digital trade rules, supply chain incentives, and new subsidy disciplines that will define 21st century commerce. A successful model is one where countries deploy diaspora negotiators as strategic assets, from preparing negotiating text to sitting in technical working groups to supporting litigation at the WTO's restored dispute settlement body.
And as calls for WTO reform grow louder, Nweke's message is clear. Africa's competitive edge may depend on how boldly it activates its diaspora in reshaping the future of global trade. For Channel Africa News, I'm Innocent Simosa in Johannesburg.
All right, we're going to be talking about in a bit Mukuru. They are a leading financial services company helping people send and receive money across Africa. So they're partnering in Malawi's nationwide clean cooking initiative. We'll find out more about that project. Also coming up after Rise and Shine is on the move. We'll check in with what to expect.
Conversations are happening, and Channel Africa is at the heart of them. We tell the African story with clarity, pride, and purpose, reaching audiences that matter to your brand. Partner with us and connect your business with listeners across borders in multiple languages and markets. For partnership opportunities, sponsorship, or sales, email us at partnership@channelafrica.co.za. Channel Africa, the African perspective.
Benjamin joining us in studio now to tell us what to expect on the Move that's coming up here on Channel Africa after the 9 a.m. news. Good morning, sir.
Hey, how are you doing?
I'm good, thanks. How are you?
Good. Yeah, we're going to go very saucy today on the show.
Oh, okay.
We're going to be speaking about the fact that the holiday season is here. And, now and then things could lead to a holiday fling.
Yeah, you are going spicy.
It's just for now, just for Decembering. It's just me and you, Asanda.
And what does this do to one's mental health?
Asanda, it's for fun. It's just for now. Just go for cocktailing, sundowners, just for us to keep each other company for the holiday season.
So we explain this to each other as partners that I'm taking a break, you taking a break.
No, you don't have to expect. You don't have to explain anything. Yeah. It's just your holiday fling. You are very old school. You over-explain things, man.
It's not for me.
So we're going to look at the thrill, but also the risks and the realities of holiday romance. We'll be speaking to Tidi Litwane, who's a relationship coach on this one.
Does it matter if you're traveling out of the country then with this holiday romance?
Yeah,
there's
exactly.
higher chances of you entering one than if you're just going from Joburg to Durban.
Exactly.
Okay.
Now you're getting
I'm getting it now. All right. Is that all you want to tell us?
No? That's the main conversation. I think that's standing out.
All right. So that's On the Move with Benjamin Mushatama and Palisa Tao coming up.
Get Channel Africa on DSTV Audio Bouquet. Channel 802.
So Mukuru, a leading financial services company helping people send and receive money across Africa, is partnering with iRise Carbon in Malawi's nationwide clean cooking initiative. The project is distributing over 150,000 improved cook stoves to households, aiming to reduce firewood use, improve indoor air quality, and ease the daily burden on families. Mukuru is supporting communities in accessing these stoves through its financial and remittance services. Joining us live to explain the partnership and its impact is Kruger Laureles, who is head of remittances at Mukuru. Kruger, thank you for joining us, and how are you this Wednesday?
Thank you for having me. I'm good. How are you?
Great. So Mukuru is partnering with iRise Carbon on the nationwide clean cooking initiative in Malawi. Can you give us a bit of background on this project and explain what your role will be in it?
Cool. So Mukuru have partnered with iRise. iRise are the specialists in clean cooking. They provide clean cooking solutions across different territories, particularly in Malawi. Mukuru, as you've mentioned, we're primarily known as a cross-border and remittance company, but we have since diversified into numerous financial services across the region. The partnership came about, we aim to have continuous development across our regions that we operate in. Malawi is a very significant region for us. We have a large customer base there, and we wanted to make sure that we put that into the community. So the partnership came about with the idea where we could assist in investing in the project to ensure that the cook stoves are distributed.
How does Mukuru's involvement help households access or benefit from these clean cook stoves?
So it's initially actually the initial investment required in terms of capital, etc., to ensure that the production is done, the distribution. We also have a network that is able to assist. We are quite ubiquitous across the region in terms of our network, and we aim to make use of that as well. It's also a great opportunity for our employees, for our partners, etc., to assist on this program.
Are there specific tools or platforms that Mukuru provides to make the distribution and uptake of cook stoves easier for families?
Well, based on the different teams that we have in country, we do have access to different communities. We are a household name in Malawi as well, which helps with the trust and the education in terms of people understanding what the benefits of this product. This is not our traditional financial services products. It's more about the putting back into the community in which we operate in.
Beyond cleaner cooking, how can this initiative supported by Mukuru provide livelihoods and reduce financial burdens for those households in Malawi?
So the actual technical aspect of the cook stove is that it reduces the amount of firewood that one needs to cook. Especially in the rural communities, there's a lot of firewood that's being chopped up. Not only is that not great for the environment, it's very time consuming. And when the cook stoves are distributed, which will be at no cost to the beneficiaries, it means that they are able to have a cleaner version of cooking, which requires less wood, and also it means that they actually have more time. Many of these individuals have to use their time instead of working or being able to find opportunities. They have to be out to collect wood to actually make the fires, etc.
How big is the rollout of this project as far as the entire country is involved, and also how long are you planning to be rolling it out for?
So the initial developments, we aim to get 150,000 cook stoves distributed in the first 12 months. There are discussions to extend the program longer than that. But as a trial, a very big trial, we wanted to start off with 150,000 cook stoves. We're expecting that this may reach about 750,000 Malawians based on households, average households. And in terms of distribution, it will primarily be in the more rural areas of Malawi. That's based on the research done. That's where most of the existing deforestation and chopping of wood for traditional cooking methods are used.
Of course, as you mentioned, you've got a big following in Malawi, but do you see other partnerships with other countries where Mukuru operates, and similar partnerships there with iRise Carbon?
We're definitely open to it. So the partnership with iRise Carbon is not limited to Malawi. As I mentioned before, it's starting off as a trial, but we could extend this to other countries. Mukuru is also open to similar partnerships, once again, within Malawi or any of the countries that we operate. We have clients that support the UN sustainability goals, and we're trying to do our part as well to contribute to those.
Kruger, thank you so much for your time and the work you do in terms of community service in places like Malawi, and your, I guess, contribution to greener energy on our continent.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Kruger Loreles is the head of remittances at Mukuru, explaining the company's role in supporting iRise Carbon's clean cooking initiative in Malawi. Of course, Mukuru being a leading financial services company where a lot of Africans send and receive money with that. And they're looking at improving indoor air quality and reducing firewood use, and having improved cook stoves being given to households. And that's how we come to the end of this edition. It's Wednesday's the 3rd of December's edition of Rise and Shine here on Channel Africa. Stay tuned to the channel. More programming coming up. My name is Asanda Beda. We'll do this again with Peter Ndoro tomorrow, 6 till 9. Make sure you tune in. And then we hand you over now to the news. Here's Onele Nzinzi. And then Onele Nzinzi with the news, right?
SABC News. The African perspective.
Thank you, Asanda. Looking at your top stories, Guinea-Bissau unable to finalize the presidential election results, and South Africa excluded from this month's 20 Sherpa meeting in the United States. Your latest news. Greetings to our listeners. The Electoral Commission in Guinea-Bissau has said it cannot finalize the presidential election results after armed men stole vote tally sheets. This comes in the wake of a military takeover, the ousting of President Umaro Sissoco Embalo, and rising tensions in the country. A political scientist specializing in African politics at the African Graduate School in Paris, Professor Douglas Yates, explains.
We're watching a crime being committed with our eyes wide open. So let me just explain that this coup, by all indications, is not a legitimate coup. That is, in Gabon, you had a coup. The military took the president, held him under arrest for over a year, and took power. What we have here is an autogolpe, a self-coup. Let me explain. The current president has already staged 2 fake coups. He staged them so that he could dissolve the parliament. And the reason was he doesn't have a majority in the parliament.
There are